A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands, the famous and classic spiritual novel. Abridged version. Franchezzo, transcribed by A. Farnese. Introduction to my earthly life and passing. I who write these pages was once known by a name that no longer signifies much in the realm of mortal existence. For clarity, I shall refer to myself by the name given in this narrative, Franchezzo. In life, I was a man of strong passions, great ambitions, and, regretfully, many flaws. My earthly life was defined by both loves and regrets, by joyous flashes of artistic achievement and the darker shadows of an unbridled temperament. My story begins in the final days of my corporeal life. I was suffering from a lingering illness that came upon me, worsened by my own heedlessness. In the conventional sense, I was not an evil man, but I had been given talents in music and the arts, as well as an acute understanding of certain spiritual truths, which I regrettably misused or disregarded. My vanity and impulsive heart led me astray more often than I care to recount. I remained proud, enamored of life's fleeting pleasures, and believed that I had all the time in the world to mend my ways. As my health deteriorated, I found myself in a quiet anguish, haunted by the knowledge that my time was short. Still, my restless mind refused to relinquish earthly attachments. In the final hours, I felt an acute longing for a deep, pure affection, one that might have sustained me and given me true purpose. In that hour, my thoughts fixed on a beloved figure, a woman whose gentle spirit called me to be better than I was. Yet I had neither listened to her counsel nor embraced her gentle love the way I should have. At length, the moment came when my physical body could no longer sustain the flickering flame of life. I felt a sudden, startling disengagement, a snapping of an invisible cord. In an instant I was free of the heavy chains of mortality, separated from my physical shell that lay cold and still before me. Though I had heard of an afterlife, I had never truly believed in or prepared for it. And so, in the first moments of my new existence, I was lost in a kind of half-light, uncertain which way to turn, or how to interpret the swirling shapes and subtle sounds drifting through my new perceptions. I tried to call out, to speak to those I once knew, but it seemed they neither heard me nor saw me. Stunned, I watched a small gathering of mourners around my body, some subdued, others weeping. Her face, the woman I had loved, was among them, pale with grief. My chest tightened with regret. The hopelessness of not being able to comfort her or speak was unbearable. I longed to tell her of my sorrow and love, but I could not. Awakening in the grey land, in a slow, dreamlike state, I felt drawn away, pulled by forces I did not understand. The familiar surroundings of my death chamber faded, and I found myself wandering through landscapes of shifting grey. I discovered to my shock that the earth plane was no longer fully visible or tangible to me. Instead, I perceived it as if through a veil. Occasionally I sensed living people, particularly those of a more sensitive nature, but I could not communicate with them in any satisfying manner. An immense sadness enveloped me, and an unrelenting remorse weighed upon my soul. I had hoped for something more glorious beyond the threshold of death, but found only dimness, sorrow, and memories of wasted opportunities. Time had a different quality in this twilight region. Days in the physical world felt like intangible moments to me, while my interior state seemed to stretch on endlessly. Yet I was not entirely alone. Other spirits drifted in that melancholy realm, some newly dead, as confused and fearful as I was. Others, more hardened, roamed with restless dissatisfaction. I saw a kind of hunger in many of them, an unending longing for the physical sensations they could no longer experience. Some wandered back to earthly haunts, seeking the amusements they once knew, though they could derive no true pleasure from them now. I felt the lure of returning to my old ways, but a deep sense of dissatisfaction tugged at me. Nothing about mortal life was the same anymore. No one recognized me, nor could I partake in the old joys. In this state, I drifted in a haze of remorse, replaying all my thoughtless deeds. The memory of my beloved's tearful eyes haunted me, and I felt an ache that was worse than any physical pain I had known. The dark entities, and the first glimmer of help. While wandering, I encountered sinister shapes. Some of these were malevolent spirits who took delight in tormenting the confused souls such as I, feeding on our fears and regrets. Their appearance was often grotesque, their presence suffused with gloom. At times I sensed them whispering, trying to seduce me into deeper despair, as though my sorrow were a sweet perfume they wished to inhale. In my darkest hour, help came from a source I had not expected. I perceived a faint, comforting glow in the murky atmosphere, and from this glow emerged a figure radiating gentleness. He approached me softly, as if not to startle. Though he was only faintly visible at first, like a light partly veiled by curtains, I sensed compassion and warmth from him. When he spoke, his voice was calm and wise. "You are weary, my brother," he said. "I have been sent to guide you into a place of rest." I hesitated, uncertain whether to trust him, for I had seen illusions and heard mocking voices in these spheres. But the sincerity of his gaze calmed my fears. Moreover, I felt some faint chord within me respond, as though I recognized in him a goodness that could not be feigned. He led me toward a region slightly brighter than the grey plains, though still very subdued. When I questioned him, he identified himself as a friend and brother in spirit, delegated to aid those who sincerely yearn for betterment. Indeed, the longing I felt for the loved one I had hurt, and the regret for my misdeeds, had acted as a magnet for higher beings to see me and help me. Though his name and rank in the spirit lands were beyond my knowledge at that time, I felt profound relief to know there was some guidance for penitent souls like me. Thus did I come under the care of a luminous brother, and thus began my true journey of atonement and spiritual education. A vision of my past. When we reached a place of relative stillness, my guide, whom I shall name Brother of Hope, instructed me to rest. From him, I learned that the remorse I felt was the seed of my eventual regeneration. My intense love and regrets opened my soul to the gentle vibrations of those who would rescue me. He cautioned, however, that the road to spiritual recovery would be neither swift nor simple. In that twilight resting place, I was shown a panoramic vision of my life. Unlike the partial, dreamlike recollections I had experienced earlier, this vision was painfully clear, detailed with every action and intention. I saw not only the surface of my deeds, but the underlying motives, all the selfish impulses and vain desires that had led me. With the clarity of spiritual perception, I recognized how many opportunities for kindness and growth I had squandered, and how often I had pursued vanity and immediate gratification. And woven throughout this tapestry of misused gifts was the love of my dear companion, she who had wished to see me a better man. In every instance when my higher nature stirred, it was because of her gentle counsel or her unwavering faith in my capacity for good. Even in those times when I brushed aside her advice, I now saw the luminous threads of her influence trying to pull me toward the light. Seeing these revelations, I felt pierced by sorrow. I was desperate to make amends, but how was I to reach her? Even if I could, would she hear my voice across the gulf of the spirit realm? My new friend consoled me, explaining that while direct contact might be difficult now, my spiritual progress would eventually bring me closer to those on earth who were receptive to my presence. I learned that the sincerity of my regret was paramount, for there are many who realize too late the magnitude of their errors, yet cling to self-pity and despair. The key to progress is accepting responsibility, moving beyond hopelessness, and striving to become better, however slowly that might unfold. The lower spheres and their purpose. The region in which I found myself was a transitional sphere, neither the darkness of the truly lost nor the gentle brightness of the higher realms. It was a place where souls who harbor guilt, remorse, or a deep need for moral realignment gradually awakened to the reality of their condition. I saw souls in many states, some crouched in corners, wailing for a relief they thought would never come. Others roamed aimlessly, driven by frustration and fear. Still others, touched by an impulse of humility, reached out to the spirit guides who sought to help them. My own place was somewhere in the middle. I was not content in my sorrow, nor did I wish to hide from truth. I yearned for forgiveness and redemption. My new friend recognized this spark of willing humility, and let me rest in a quiet part of the sphere, a place surrounded by subdued lights, faint but comforting. As my strength returned, he began to teach me about the laws of spiritual growth, that love and humility open the path, while pride, resentment, and hatred bind the soul to heavier vibrations. Indeed, the very environment around each soul is shaped by its inner state. When one is consumed by selfishness or malice, the atmosphere grows dark and dense. When one seeks kindness, truth, and love, the atmosphere brightens. Hence the variety of conditions in these lower spheres, each tailored to the spiritual frequency of its inhabitants. In the earth life, people can conceal their innermost intentions, but here their aura reveals their disposition and draws them to the realm that matches their state. Lessons from the Brother of Hope. It seemed that the Brother of Hope had come primarily to grant me a reprieve from the influences of darker spirits and to show me that I was not forsaken. He explained the logic of divine justice and mercy, that each soul must learn to cleanse itself of the burdens of past wrongdoing by experiencing a purgatorial phase. I had loved art, music, and life passionately, but I had also squandered these gifts and manipulated the emotions of others. Therefore, I needed to face the consequences of my flawed choices. The pain I felt was not inflicted as a random punishment. Rather, it was the natural repercussion of the moral and emotional energies I had unleashed. However, I was relieved to learn that no soul is permanently cast into darkness if they sincerely choose to ascend toward the light. The torment of remorse is a purifying fire, forging humility and the desire to right one's wrongs. My friend invited me to reflect upon my life and to identify each instance where I could have done good but chose harm, or where I allowed selfish motivations to triumph over empathy. Then I was to hold each memory in my mind, releasing the guilt and offering heartfelt contrition. This was not to wallow in self-condemnation, but to catalyze genuine aspiration to change. From time to time, the Brother of Hope would leave me to attend to other souls. During his absences, I sometimes heard haunting whispers from the gloom, or felt tugs of negativity that threatened to pull me back into that more oppressive realm. At such moments, I summoned the memory of my beloved and the face of the luminous guide to sustain me. In doing so, I learned that a soul's earnest aspiration forms a kind of protective shield, calling forth the help of higher spirits and repelling darker influences. The stirring of my artistic longings. During my rest in that place of subdued light, I discovered that my ability to imagine music or forms of art remained with me, albeit in a new and delicate way. Previously, in my earthly life, I had prided myself on my artistic gifts, occasionally using them to charm and manipulate. Now I approached them with a contrite heart. Instead of craving applause, I sought simply to express the beauty of yearning, the sorrow of repentance, and the fragile hope that had begun to grow within me. Though no physical instruments were at my disposal, my spirit could sense harmonies that arose from within. At times I seemed to hear distant chords resonating from spheres beyond my immediate reach, music far more transcendent than anything I had encountered on earth. The loveliness of that unseen choir moved me deeply, stirring my desire to progress so that I might one day experience that music more fully. My guide encouraged these artistic impulses, explaining that such creations, when rooted in sincerity, can help refine the soul and impart solace to others in the same realm. Nonetheless, I was warned against letting vanity or pride seep in again. Spiritual progress must be built on humility and a longing for truth, not the illusions of self-glorification that had so often deceived me in mortal life. Yearning to aid others. As I grew slightly stronger, I noticed other spirits who, like me, had begun to open their hearts to the possibility of atonement. Some were battered by remorse, crying out for help but unsure how to proceed. I felt an instinctive urge to comfort them, to share the little I had learned. During these attempts, I discovered that giving solace to others lessened my own sorrow. If I showed empathy, that empathy would come back to me in a gentle wave of reassurance. This discovery introduced me to one of the great laws of the spirit worlds, that in serving the needs of others, we also heal ourselves, for we are all intricately connected. The more I practiced this, the more I felt my soul was growing in clarity and purpose. It was as if a bright current ran through me, bridging the gulf between my regrets and the seeds of forgiveness taking root in my heart. An unexpected encounter with dark spirits. My lessons were tested one day when I ventured too far from the restful zone. Perhaps out of curiosity or an imprudent desire to see how far I had come, I strayed into a gloomier region of the lower planes. Before I realized it, I was surrounded by sullen, mocking figures who recognized my vulnerability. Their leader, a spirit with twisted features and a cold glint in his eyes, sneered at my attempts at reform. He accused me of hypocrisy, recounting the many sins and weaknesses of my mortal life, as though reading from a hidden register. Every blow sank into my conscience, and I felt my newfound confidence waver. These beings seemed eager to crush my fragile hope, delighting in reminding me of my guilt. For a moment, I felt the suffocating pull of despair, but then I remembered the quiet teachings of my guide. I recalled the tears of my beloved, the warmth of my luminous mentor, and the subtle joys that come when one chooses the light over darkness. Summoning what courage I had, I rebuked their taunts and called upon the higher powers for protection. A faint radiance appeared around me, and though I felt the effort draining, I stood firm. Eventually, the mocking spirits slunk away, snarling and spitting hateful words, for they could not endure the gentle light that surrounded me when I invoked my guide's teachings. Exhausted, I managed to find my way back to the more peaceful zone, where I collapsed in a mixture of relief and trembling. Soon the Brother of Hope appeared, commending my determination and cautioning me not to wander recklessly. The lower spheres, he reminded me, are filled with predatory spirits who thrive on the insecurities of souls. Only patient growth and the steady strengthening of one's inner light can ensure safety in such regions. Encouragement to persevere. This battle with darker entities, though frightening, strengthened my resolve. I realized that my moral weaknesses were like open doors for negative influences. Therefore, part of my spiritual training involved understanding how to close these doors through sincere contrition, forgiveness of self and others, and the cultivation of purer desires. At times I asked whether I might leave this realm entirely and ascend to a brighter sphere, but my guide explained that my soul had not yet shed the dense vibrations attached to my old vices. Like a weight that keeps a balloon from rising, these untransmuted elements within me held me back. No external force can simply lift a soul to higher planes. Rather, each must learn the lessons that purify their inner being, thus making them light enough to rise naturally. This is the law of spiritual evolution and free will. He reminded me of the love of my friend on earth, whose prayers, though not always consciously directed, reached me and helped sustain my efforts. In time, if I persevered, I might be permitted to draw near her once more, perhaps to inspire her heart, or help her in ways I could not during my earthly life. Slowly this prospect ignited my determination. I had lived selfishly in mortal life, but I would not continue as such in the spirit. I yearned to serve as a protector, a helper, a friend to those I had once injured, especially to her who had given me such unwavering love. With these hopes and a newfound sense of spiritual direction, I resolved to submit myself to the discipline of the higher guardians who moved silently among us, seeking those who were ready to learn. Thus did my soul's real journey commence, no longer a hapless wanderer, but a penitent traveller guided by the faint glow of love and repentance, heading toward realms of greater light. A time of reflection and preparation. After my encounter with the darker spirits, I retreated to the place of subdued light, where I recovered my strength. Daily, or so it seemed, though time had lost its former meaning, I met with the Brother of Hope and other luminous companions who taught me more about the spirit lands. They helped me reflect upon my life in a methodical way, that I might free myself of guilt's harsh grip. From these mentors, I learned that divine law is not arbitrary punishment. Rather, it is rooted in harmony and balance. We reap what we sow because each thought and act leaves its impression on our own spirit. The remorse and suffering I experienced were not commanded by an outside force. They were the natural consequences of my own moral failures. In acknowledging this truth, I felt both humbled and strangely relieved, for it meant I had the power, through understanding and contrition, to ease my own burdens. Among our group of learning souls, we shared experiences to encourage and guide one another. Some had been ruthless in their earthly dealings, cheating, exploiting, or oppressing others. Others had carried hatreds or violent impulses. Yet we found hope in the promise that genuine remorse could soften the hardest heart. The challenge lay in facing painful memories without fleeing into denial or bitterness. At times I was allowed to see glimpses of earthly events, particularly those involving my beloved, whose life continued in the material world. She mourned my passing, regretting we had not parted on better terms. Her prayers and loving thoughts reached me like gentle beams of light, providing comfort and strengthening my resolve. Although I could not make my presence known to her directly, I sometimes sensed the subtle interplay of our shared affection. Visits to the earth plane. As I progressed, certain privileges were extended to me. One was the opportunity to visit Earth in the company of a more advanced guide. These excursions required careful preparation, for the temptations of earthly life could easily entangle a spirit still struggling to overcome old weaknesses. When I first visited the earth plane, I was overcome by a sense of longing and sorrow. I saw familiar places, my former home, streets where I had once walked, the theatre where I had performed. Yet now they existed behind a thin veil. I could see living people, but they were unaware of my presence. Only in rare instances did someone with heightened sensitivity sense a stirring when I approached. I discovered, with mingled remorse and relief, that my old habits held less power than before. The realization that I could no longer partake in the superficial pleasures of mortal life was painful, but ultimately liberating. My guide showed me how to direct my focus not on reclaiming the past, but on observing the lessons unfolding among the living. Each person has a tapestry of spiritual connections, and even small acts of kindness or cruelty can echo profoundly. I began to understand how my own careless deeds had rippled outward, hurting others in ways I had not realized. During one such journey, I witnessed the grief of my beloved. She sat in solitude, holding a small token I had once given her, an ornament of my affection. Tears fell as she remembered my life and lamented our parting. I yearned to hold her, to speak words of comfort. In my anguish, I turned to my guide, who quietly reminded me that my greatest act of love now was to continue my spiritual progress, so that I might one day serve as a benevolent influence in her life. Only purified spirits can truly help mortals without unintentionally causing harm or draining energy from them. Work in the lower realms. My guide's teachings went beyond personal growth. He spoke of the great need for workers in the lower spheres, spirits willing to return to those grey and dreary realms, or even darker depths, to rescue souls mired in despair. The higher beings, often referred to as brothers of light, serve ceaselessly, striving to awaken compassion or contrition in the hardest hearts. At first, the thought of venturing back into those grim territories filled me with dread. My initial experiences there were harrowing. Yet the more I learned, the more I realized that growth, healing, and eventual ascent to brighter realms often come through service. My own redemption, I realized, might be furthered by helping those whose pain was as raw as mine had once been. Indeed, I felt I owed this debt of compassion, having once been so blind and self-absorbed. While my guide cautioned that I needed more strength and stability before undertaking any extensive mission, he allowed me brief visits to the lower regions under supervision. There, I found souls in states of shocking misery, some huddled in corners, some raging against any notion of divine mercy. The environment itself seemed shaped by their hopelessness, perpetual shadows, cold winds, and a feeling of oppressive weight. Here, I saw, was the manifestation of unrepented hatred, greed, and lust that chained spirits to a nightmarish reflection of their own darkest impulses. A few souls reached out for help, their remorse flickering like a faint candle. When such a plea emerged, the Brothers of Light would draw close, offering gentle counsel or leading them to a calmer zone where they could begin the process of healing. However, many rejected these offers, lashing out at the very hope extended to them. My heart ached at the sight, recalling my own initial resistance. I marveled at the patience and compassion these advanced spirits showed, never giving up on any soul, no matter how lost it seemed. Encounters with the shadowy realm. In the course of my supervised visits, I became increasingly aware of an even more desolate sphere, lower than the bleak grey lands. In that realm, the darkness felt so dense that it seemed almost tangible. The spirits who inhabited it were consumed by hatred or profound selfishness, often banded together in grotesque parodies of earthly communities, ruled by tyrannical leaders or warlike factions. This region's atmosphere was charged with suspicion and malice, as though every inhabitant plotted against the rest. Though I never ventured deeply into that sphere in those early days, my guide allowed me to glimpse the outskirts. I saw to my horror how cruelly some souls tormented others, and how traps of illusions were set to deceive the unwary. Indeed, those who grew tired of the gloom sometimes tried to escape, only to be ensnared by cunning spirits, posing as angels of light or seductive figures promising new power or pleasures. Invariably, these illusions led them deeper into the labyrinth of their own weaknesses, yet amidst the horror, occasional beams of genuine light would shine forth. These came from rescuers, spiritual helpers from higher realms, who braved the gloom to find individuals who had awakened to the desire for change. I witnessed their courageous efforts, how they fearlessly approached the darkest corners and engaged with souls trapped by vice or despair. Many times their offers of assistance were violently rejected, but they persevered, knowing that even a single soul redeemed from that shadowy place was worth the effort. My growing resolve. Observing these missions stirred in me a deep admiration and a longing to emulate these selfless acts. I wanted to repay the kindness shown to me when I was a confused, despairing wanderer. However, I was not yet ready. My emotional wounds were still tender, and I had much to learn about spiritual laws, self-restraint, and the delicate art of guiding another's conscience. My guide reassured me that each step has its proper season. My immediate task was to cultivate inner resilience, humility, and the capacity to channel loving compassion rather than judgment or impatience. Some of my fellow students in the subdued light region shared my desire to serve. Others were overwhelmed by guilt and found it difficult to imagine moving beyond their private pains. I endeavored to encourage them, recalling how empathy had alleviated my own torments. The more I offered what little insight I possessed, the more my sense of purpose solidified. Over time, I discovered that my artistic inclinations could be harmonized with my growing dedication to service. In quiet moments, I visualized uplifting scenes or composed faint melodies in my mind, focusing on themes of hope and renewal. Occasionally, when I encountered a spirit lost in sorrow, I would project these gentle harmonies as best I could, hoping they might sense a spark of comfort. My guide explained that thought forms, when infused with sincere feeling, can reach others in ways akin to telepathy. Music, in particular, resonates with the soul, bridging gaps language cannot. The Halls of Learning. After I had progressed sufficiently in my lessons, I was taken to a place known among the spirits as the Halls of Learning. This was a more refined sphere, still not truly heavenly, but notably brighter than the one I had been inhabiting. Here, towering edifices stood, built of luminous etheric substances, each dedicated to a branch of knowledge or a facet of spiritual development. Countless souls moved along corridors and open courtyards, studying, contemplating, and exchanging insights. A sense of calm dedication pervaded the atmosphere. Entering this realm, I felt both awe and trepidation, much like a student stepping into a grand university for the first time. My guide led me to a wing where new arrivals were oriented to the tasks and opportunities of these halls. I saw that spirits of many backgrounds, once scholars, artists, inventors, healers, or simply earnest seekers, gathered here, all united by a common desire to expand their understanding and refine their moral character. Among the subjects taught were the laws of karma, the nature of vibrational frequencies, the interplay between thoughts and spiritual creation, and the mysteries of the higher celestial planes. Some classes delved into the science of healing, demonstrating how love and compassion could restore harmony in wounded souls. Others focused on the special gifts individuals had developed or could develop, like artistry, teaching, or counsel. One area that piqued my interest was the healing of earthbound souls. I learned that many spirits remain stubbornly attached to earthly vices, alcohol, drugs, lust, or greed, because they have not recognized that these cravings can never again be fulfilled in the spiritual state. This attachment often leads them to haunt earthly dens where such indulgences occur, trying in vain to experience a sensation long lost to them. Specialized groups of compassionate spirits dedicate themselves to gently loosening those attachments, guiding these unfortunate souls away from the earth plane and toward a place of restoration. Lessons in self-insight. In my own studies, I was guided to examine the subtle interplay between thought, emotion, and character. What we dwell upon in our minds shapes our spiritual form and influences the atmosphere around us. Like an artist painting on a canvas, our daily thoughts create patterns of color or darkness upon our auric field. Negative obsessions form knots of shadow in our auras, while uplifting reflections generate patterns of light and harmony. Through meditative exercises, we practice controlling our wandering thoughts, filling our inner vision with concepts of compassion, forgiveness, and hope. At first it felt difficult. My mind would slip back into regrets or old temptations. Gradually, however, I gained more mastery. The warm encouragement of teachers and the consistent cooperation of fellow students boosted my confidence. We cheered one another's breakthroughs, for we sensed we were all pilgrims on a shared path toward greater enlightenment. Encounters with higher guides. During my sojourn in the halls of learning, I occasionally saw luminous figures who, I sensed, dwelled in spheres far beyond my current reach. They appeared only briefly, often visiting the instructors or offering guidance for specific students. Their presence exuded serenity and an indescribable purity of purpose. To be in their vicinity, even momentarily, was to feel a deep peace stealing over me. Though these higher guides seldom lingered, their influence remained. In quiet contemplation, I felt their love urging me onward. They reminded me that the spirit universe is vast, layered with countless realms of existence, each serving a unique function in the grand design. The aim of every soul's journey is to ascend toward unity with divine love, shedding the burdens of selfishness and fear along the way. A new mission emerges. As my time in the halls of learning unfolded, I felt a stirring that perhaps I was ready to take on a specific mission in the lower spheres. One day, a teacher approached me saying, "Franchezzo, you have progressed well in harnessing your remorse and turning it into compassion. There is a group of souls in the Grey Lands, some newly arrived, others long adrift, who might respond to your empathy. Will you join a small band of helpers to guide them into the transitional zone where they can rest and receive healing?" I felt both excitement and apprehension. Though I had visited the lower spheres before, returning with a leadership role felt intimidating, yet I also sensed the call of duty. Remembering my own confusion and the mercy extended to me, I resolved to accept. I spent several sessions in preparation, learning how to maintain my inner balance amidst the anguish or hostility I might encounter. The teacher explained that my past experiences could help me relate to the souls who believe themselves unworthy or hopeless. "Speak to them with honesty," the teacher advised. "Share your own story, how you too once despaired and how love and sincerity lifted you. They may listen to you where they might ignore others." Finally, the day of departure arrived. Our small group was composed of spirits at roughly my level of advancement, overseen by a more experienced brother of light. We gathered our strength and focused our intentions on radiating warmth and patience. Then, through a shift in vibration, a process I still only partially understood, we descended from the relatively bright atmosphere of the halls to the muted gloom of the Grey Lands, service among the wandering souls. Upon arrival, we beheld a scene reminiscent of my own arrival after death. Dim expanses, drifting spirits lost in regret or bitterness, pockets of restless wandering. Some recognized our brighter aura immediately, and either fled in shame or approached warily, fearing rebuke or trickery. Gently, we offered understanding and the promise of relief if they would only open themselves to it. One particular soul we encountered was that of a young man who had died in a sudden accident. Terrified by his abrupt separation from earthly life, he clung desperately to the memory of his family. But all he saw when he tried to approach them was their grief and their ignorance of his presence. He fell into despair, haunted by the feeling of being invisible and helpless. Drawing upon my own experience, I comforted him, explaining that his family's sorrow was natural, and that, in time, he might learn to make his presence felt in subtle ways, through loving thoughts and gentle inspiration. We invited him to follow us to a resting place in the transitional zone, where he could gather his wits and receive clearer guidance. At first he was reluctant, but glimpsing the compassionate faces in our group, and realizing that clinging to the old house brought him only pain, he acquiesced. This small success heartened me, reminding me of the delicate interplay between free will and spiritual intervention. Yet not all encounters were so cooperative. We found souls hardened by anger, cursing God, cursing fate, or clinging to earthly resentments. "Why should we trust you?" they snarled. "We believed in a heaven that never came." Others laughed bitterly at any suggestion of hope, convinced that they deserved perpetual punishment or that no goodness could penetrate their misery. We did our best to plant seeds of compassion, but many refused, at least for the moment. Nonetheless, each act of caring generated a ripple of light in that dreary environment, which might one day expand when a soul was ready. I began to understand that spiritual service is measured not by immediate results, but by the sincerity of one's effort and the invisible help it brings to those seeds of regret waiting to germinate. Even a single word of kindness can resonate long after it is spoken, if the soul receiving it later ponders and remembers. Testing my resolve. In the course of our mission, I encountered a spirit who had known me in earthly life, an old rival I had antagonized through arrogance and envy. Now in the spirit lands, he languished in bitterness, recalling every instance of conflict between us. When he recognized me, his countenance twisted with resentment, and he raged that I was merely adding hypocrisy to my sins by posing as a helper. The sting of his accusation struck deep. All my old insecurities threatened to resurface. My first instinct was to argue, to defend myself. But I remembered my spiritual training. Pride and anger only drag us downward. Quietly, I acknowledged the truth of his words, that I had mistreated him and let jealousy poison our rapport. I asked for forgiveness and offered what healing I could. My vulnerable sincerity disarmed him somewhat, and though he did not fully embrace reconciliation, he paused in his tirade. I took that as a hopeful sign. This incident illustrated how the seeds of past strife can echo in the afterlife, needing resolution. I realized that the willingness to admit fault and seek amends is crucial. We cannot fix every wrong in an instant, but we can sow the beginnings of reconciliation through humility and honesty. After several similar encounters, our small band concluded its mission, guiding a handful of repentant souls to a place of rest and planting seeds of hope in many more. Though weary, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Back in the transitional zone, we debriefed with our supervising brother of light, who gently pointed out areas where we could improve: greater patience, deeper empathy, less self-consciousness. I took these lessons to heart, determined to refine my approach on the next mission, a glimpse of the future. As I settled back into my routine of study and meditation, I sensed I was nearing another turning point in my spiritual journey. The strong desire to see my beloved again, and perhaps assist her from the other side, simmered in my heart. Yet I realized that my best way to honor her love was to continue to advance in understanding and compassion. This would enable me to become a true guardian if the opportunity arose. Over time, I grew convinced that further study and service in the spirit lands would eventually prepare me to act as a spirit guide, albeit a modest one, to mortals in need of inspiration or protection. In fleeting, hopeful visions, I saw her life unfold, her quiet determination to overcome grief, her gentle acts of charity. My heart soared at the thought that one day I might stand beside her, unseen but ever watchful, returning in some measure the devotion she had given me so freely during my earthly sojourn. Such thoughts renewed my resolve to ascend step by step from these lower planes toward the splendors that lie beyond. I understood that each new sphere demanded fresh purifications of the soul and a deeper alignment with the laws of divine love. Though I did not know how many stages lay ahead, I felt certain that the path itself would be my greatest teacher. In seeking to uplift others, I would also uplift myself, and thus gradually earn my way into the radiance of higher realms where perfect harmony reigns, the call to higher study. In the period following my first organized service mission among the Greylands, I continued my studies in the halls of learning. Each time I returned there, I found my understanding of spiritual truths deepening. The teachers showed me that it is not enough to help others in a general sense. True spiritual service also requires self-awareness, discipline, and a willingness to work tirelessly on one's own shortcomings. One day, as I rested in a quiet chamber after a lesson, a gentle but insistent summons tugged at my mind. Obeying this subtle call, I followed an inner sense of direction until I reached a small domed hall flanked by tall columns of glowing stone. Inside, a radiant teacher awaited me, a spirit whose mere presence inspired reverence. With a kind smile, he said, "Franchezzo, you have shown sincere devotion to improving yourself and aiding others. Are you prepared to embark on a deeper path of discovery, one that may reveal hidden aspects of your own nature and the spirit worlds?" Startled but eager, I knelt before him in respectful acknowledgement. I answered that I wished very much to expand my understanding, though I felt unsure whether I was worthy of deeper revelations. He reassured me, "No soul is ever fully prepared, but a humble heart and willingness to learn open the gates of wisdom." He then invited me to join a specialized circle of students who were studying the intricate workings of thought forms, the processes by which souls ascend, and the universal tapestry that binds spirits across many spheres. The teacher's name was seldom spoken openly, but some of my peers quietly referred to him as the Master of Illumination, one who carried knowledge from still higher realms and shared it with those ready to receive it. Learning of thought power and creation. Under his guidance, we delved into the concept that thoughts are not mere abstractions. They are living energies that shape our spiritual environment. We learned how advanced spirits construct whole realms of beauty and harmony through the power of elevated thought, just as darker souls might generate realms of gloom through destructive or selfish fixations. The Master of Illumination demonstrated how a pure, focused imagination could build subtle structures or luminous vistas in the astral substance that permeates the spirit worlds. In practical exercises, we were taught to concentrate on creating small forms, flowers, geometric shapes, or gentle rays of light, sustaining their existence through calm, continuous attention. We discovered that the quality of our motive mattered greatly. When our efforts sprang from vanity or a desire to impress, the forms we created were weak, hazy, and quickly dissolved. Only when we worked with love, curiosity, or a sincere wish to serve did our creations take on lasting vibrancy. The Master explained that many realms in the afterlife are formed collectively by groups of spirits who share a similar moral and creative vision. In harmonious regions, souls unite their thoughts in communal patterns, giving rise to structures of exquisite design and radiant colors unknown on Earth. In discordant regions, fear and hatred likewise shape the environment, turning it bleak or chaotic. "We each contribute to the tapestry of our home," said the Master. "To move toward the higher spheres is to refine one's thoughts and feelings, so one naturally resonates with realms of greater beauty and love." The purification of memories. Meanwhile, I continued to wrestle with memories of my earthly failings. Though my remorse had lessened in its raw intensity, I still felt pangs of regret whenever I recalled certain unkind deeds. One evening, the Master of Illumination guided us through a process of purification of memories, instructing us to review specific events from our lives with a compassionate but truthful gaze. He taught that shame and guilt, while signs of moral conscience, can bind us if we wallow in them excessively. Instead, we were to acknowledge our mistakes, accept responsibility, and direct heartfelt empathy, both toward our victims and toward our own ignorance at the time. "Send light to your past self," he said, "and invite that younger version of you to grow. Then, carry forward the lessons gleaned, releasing the rest into the higher wisdom that forgives all who sincerely repent." Though the exercise was emotionally taxing, I felt a profound liberation by the end of it. Certain memories that had tormented me began to dissolve into a clearer understanding. I saw how my selfishness or quick temper had obscured my better nature, and how different choices could have led to vastly kinder outcomes. I recognized that these revelations not only helped me, but would enhance my ability to guide others who grappled with similar regrets. Visits to the borderlands and Earth connections. During this phase of deeper study, I also continued short missions to the transitional zones of the afterlife, assisting newly arrived spirits. At times, I accompanied a more advanced guide who specialized in helping souls sever harmful attachments to the earth plane. I witnessed how some souls, still caught up in old addictions, returned to earthly taverns, gambling dens, or other centers of vice, hoping to recapture a sensation long lost to them. In these visits, my role was often to approach the wandering spirit with gentle empathy, describing my own experiences of clinging to earthly desires. If they showed even a flicker of willingness to listen, I urged them to come away from the haunting scenes where they could only frustrate themselves. Although many refused my counsel, a few responded with hesitant hope. Whenever a lost spirit permitted us to guide them, we steered them toward a region where they could rest and gradually shed those lingering cravings. In parallel, I found ways to convey subtle encouragement to earthbound individuals, especially to my beloved, whose life and prayers still beckoned to me. By harmonizing my thoughts with the higher spheres, I could send her gentle impressions, faint but real, of comfort and reassurance. Occasionally, she sensed my presence in dreams, waking with a feeling of closeness. Though I could not reveal myself to her plainly, these moments were treasures, affirming that the veil between our worlds was permeable to love. Encounters with opposing forces. As my understanding increased, so too did the complexity of the spiritual terrains we explored. Not all of our efforts were met with gratitude. In certain corners of the afterlife, I encountered souls who actively resisted any form of light, preferring to cling to anger or revenge. Even more unsettling, I became aware of organized groups of malevolent spirits who twisted their intelligence to maintain oppressive control over others in the darker realms. Some of these beings had been powerful in earthly life, rulers, manipulators, or cunning leaders of criminal enterprises. In death, they continued to exert a magnetic influence over weaker souls, fueling cycles of fear and aggression. When beings of light attempted rescue missions, these dark chieftains would rise in defiance, trying to block or confuse the efforts. They cultivated illusions to frighten newly deceased souls into submission, convincing them that there was no hope of improvement. Yet, despite their frightening demeanor, the Master of Illumination taught us that no soul is beyond redemption if it truly desires it. Most of these dark overlords had not yet reached that point. They relished their power, illusory though it was. Nevertheless, from time to time, even the most hardened spirit would experience a moment of clarity, perhaps triggered by the memory of a loved one left behind on earth, or an old act of goodness once performed. In that moment, the higher helpers could step in, offering a lifeline. Progression and shifts in vibrational state. My studies under the Master of Illumination also involved the concept of vibrational shifts, the idea that one's soul literally changes frequency as it assimilates higher truths. These changes manifested as subtle expansions of perception. Certain colors in the spirit lands grew more vivid. I began to hear delicate harmonies I had not noticed before. My capacity to empathize deepened, allowing me to sense the emotional states of others without becoming overwhelmed. During group meditations, we practiced aligning our individual energies to create a collective field of light. This synergy amplified our ability to commune with still higher planes. Afterward, a soft luminescence would linger around us, as though we carried a fragment of that heightened vibration back into our daily routine. With each successful group meditation, I felt an unmistakable shift in my own aura, a cleaner, clearer sense of purpose. Despite these encouraging signs, I remained conscious that my journey was far from complete. Old tendencies, pride, impatience, or the sting of hurt vanity still sometimes surfaced. The difference now was that I recognized them more quickly and strove to correct my attitude before it could spiral into harmful behavior. My teachers reminded me that every incremental victory over a past vice strengthened my inner light. Pilgrimage to the realms of beauty. After several cycles of learning and service, the Master of Illumination informed our group of a special opportunity, a pilgrimage to certain realms of beauty, higher yet than the halls of learning. These were regions of vibrant splendor, where artistic creation, music, and spiritual insight flourished in a harmonious blend. The atmosphere, he told us, would be more refined than any we had yet experienced, and simply entering it would bring both joy and challenge. We would each be tested to see if our inner state was compatible with those lofty vibrations. Eager and a bit anxious, I joined the group. We were led by 2 advanced guides, who helped adjust our frequency through prayer, meditation, and a conscious shedding of lower impulses. As we traveled, if one may use that term for changes in spiritual states, I felt a lightness permeate my being, as though the very atoms of my soul were invigorated by a new energy. Then, in what seemed a single breath, we emerged into a realm of breathtaking beauty. Rolling meadows where colors shimmered in hues beyond the earthly spectrum, crystal streams emitting gentle melodies, and architecture that radiated living light. It was as though every element in the environment had awakened to a higher consciousness, each flower or tree exuding a sense of joy and collaboration. In this realm, I encountered spirits of remarkable purity. Some were poets and composers in earthly life, now creating masterpieces that vibrated in perfect harmony with the surroundings. Others served as wise counselors, guiding visitors in how to harness creativity for spiritual upliftment. I saw that all forms of art here served a sacred function, the expression of the soul's unity with divine love. Challenges in a higher sphere. Yet even in this realm of wonder, not all was effortless. The refined atmosphere acted like a mirror, reflecting any discordant thought back upon the soul. If one harbored even a trace of selfishness or envy, one felt it acutely, as though it disrupted the pristine harmony around us. At times, I found my old insecurities resurfacing, concerns about my worthiness or fleeting comparisons with others' talents. These impulses felt jarringly out of place, prompting me to humble myself and silently request forgiveness. Fortunately, the advanced spirits in this sphere were gentle and encouraging. They seemed to radiate compassion, helping visitors maintain a harmonious state. They also offered guidance on how to transform a momentary negative thought into an opportunity for deeper self-knowledge. One spirit, who appeared as a luminous artist of extraordinary grace, told me, "In this realm, fear and doubt cannot hide. They surface immediately, so we can transmute them into love and clarity. Think of it as a refining fire that makes the gold of your character shine." Though my time in these realms of beauty was relatively brief, I was profoundly inspired. I saw with new clarity the infinite possibilities that unfold when souls devote their powers to serving love, beauty, and wisdom. I vowed to deepen my commitment to spiritual refinement, so that I might one day dwell in such a realm without discomfort or limitation, return, and the desire to serve. After our pilgrimage, we returned to the halls of learning with renewed vigor. The Master of Illumination asked each of us to reflect on what we had experienced and to define our personal goals going forward. For my part, I felt a growing conviction that my path lay in balancing higher creative inspiration with outreach to struggling souls in the lower planes. I did not yet belong to those exalted realms, but glimpsing their glory filled me with both aspiration and humility. I also felt a deep longing to share these experiences in some form that might reach earthbound minds. Many mortals live in fear of death or remain ignorant of the spiritual realities that await them. Though I could not yet directly communicate with the living on a broad scale, the Master hinted that there were special channels, mediums, sensitive individuals, through whom spirits could convey messages. He suggested that, in time, I might be allowed to communicate certain truths through such a channel, if I cultivated the necessary purity and clarity of mind. This idea thrilled me, for I recalled how, during my earthly life, I had scoffed at spiritual communications, labeling them as superstitions. Now, realizing the immensity of what lies beyond mortal sight, I wished nothing more than to offer reassurance and guidance to those still in the flesh. Encounters with my past. Through service. As I took on more frequent missions to the lower realms, I encountered echoes of my own past in startling ways. For instance, on one rescue attempt, we discovered a young woman who had died from a broken heart after being cruelly discarded by a man she loved. Her spirit was drenched in sorrow, wandering a bleak territory, convinced she was worthless. I saw in her despair a reflection of what my beloved might have felt had I treated her even more harshly. Overcome by compassion, I knelt beside the weeping spirit and gently told her she was not alone, that love, true love, had never abandoned her. I recounted my own experience of realizing too late the preciousness of another's heart. Though I did not share the full story, I emphasized the importance of self-forgiveness, reminding her that we are each responsible for our choices, but also recipients of divine grace. She listened, uncertain but hopeful, and allowed me to lead her into a zone of comfort. There, the healing process could begin under the care of more experienced ministers. The gratitude she expressed moved me deeply. I felt as though my own old wounds were being healed in that moment, for by helping her, I symbolically offered an apology to all the souls I had hurt through carelessness. It reaffirmed my belief that by serving others, we rewrite the painful chapters of our past with pages of kindness, developing a sense of unity. Through these varied experiences, study, rescue missions, pilgrimages, I gradually awakened to a sense of unity with all life. The Master of Illumination taught that every act of compassion, no matter how modest, contributes to a collective upliftment. Aiding a single lost soul in the grey lands, or offering encouragement to an earthbound spirit, helps weave threads of light into the broader fabric of existence. Conversely, yielding to anger or despair sends ripples of discord that echo through the spiritual planes. He illustrated this with a vivid analogy. Imagine each soul as a musical instrument in a grand cosmic orchestra. Whenever we tune our strings to love and harmony, we enrich the universal symphony. But if we cling to discordant notes of hatred or fear, the collective melody is marred. Thus, let each one strive to keep their instrument in tune. This teaching resonated with me. It explained not only the structure of the spirit lands, but also illuminated the purpose behind our ongoing trials. By refining ourselves, we refine the collective. By helping others, we honor our own divine potential, a fresh commitment. As the cycles of learning continued, I felt a stirring that my time in the halls of learning might soon transition to a new phase, perhaps a more specialized service or an opportunity to approach the earth plane in a guiding capacity. In quiet reflection, I reaffirmed my twofold vow: first, to ascend toward the higher realms by purifying my thoughts, cultivating creative expression, and embracing service; second, to dedicate myself to reaching back into the darker realms, and when the time was right, to earth itself, to spark hope and understanding wherever possible. I found my beloved's image often in my thoughts. I yearned for the day when my progress might allow me to draw closer to her, and perhaps guide her in subtle but meaningful ways. I knew I still had much ground to cover, yet the glimpses of possibility I had seen in the realms of beauty, along with the blessings of the Master of Illumination, fueled my determination. Thus, with renewed gratitude and vision, I prepared myself for whatever new opportunities or trials lay on the horizon. My spirit felt both humbled by the vastness of creation and buoyed by the knowledge that each sincere effort, no matter how small, was valued in the eyes of the Eternal, preparing for a new phase. Not long after my deepening commitment to continue both study and service, I was informed by my instructors that I would soon enter a new phase of training. The Master of Illumination called me to a private audience, his demeanor warm yet solemn. He explained that in order for me to become a more effective helper in the lower spheres, and potentially to serve as a guide to mortals, I would need certain tests to refine my inner strength. "You have made admirable progress, Franchezzo," he said. "Yet your old impulses have not fully dissolved. These tests will challenge your capacity for humility, compassion, and self-restraint. They are not punishments, but opportunities to consolidate what you have learned." With a respectful bow, I expressed my willingness. Though I felt a quiet apprehension, I trusted that these trials would ultimately deepen my resolve. The Master placed a luminous hand upon my forehead, and in that moment I sensed a subtle infusion of courage, as though an invisible mantle had settled around my shoulders. The trial of self-doubt. Soon afterward, circumstances shifted. During one of my rescue visits to the Greylands, I encountered a spirit in deep turmoil, a man who had ended his own life in despair. He was tormented by guilt and by the mistaken belief that he had placed himself beyond all redemption. When I tried to console him, he turned on me with a sudden ferocity, flinging accusations that struck painfully close to my old insecurities. "How dare you speak of hope and mercy?" he cried. "You're no better than I am. Perhaps you only pretend to help because you crave some reward from these so-called higher powers." His words stung, for they mirrored the old self-accusations that sometimes haunted me, the fear that I was disguising my innate flaws with a veneer of penance. Anger flared within me. How easily those hot embers could reignite. My first impulse was to rebuke him, to assert the purity of my intentions. Yet I felt the gentle prompting of my guide, one of the brothers of light who accompanied me, to respond with calm patience rather than indignation. Summoning what I had learned, I knelt before the tormented man and admitted he was correct that I too had erred in life. Indeed, I had often worn a mask of virtue while succumbing to vanity and pride. But I insisted that divine mercy welcomes even the most lost soul when true repentance stirs. "I help because I was helped," I said simply. "And any light you see in me is the reflection of those who rescued me when I was in darkness." Though his anger persisted, I felt its edge soften. My humility had disarmed the man's hostility, if only slightly. In that difficult exchange, I recognized the first of my trials: to withstand scrutiny without falling into self-righteousness or despair. I left that encounter humbled but grateful for the lesson. Encounters with earthly echoes. Another test arrived shortly thereafter. I was granted permission for a closer visit to the earth plane, one that would bring me near the circle of acquaintances I had known in life. My primary motivation was to see if I could be of service, subtly, to my beloved. However, my guides cautioned me that I must also confront echoes of my past failings in more direct ways than before. Upon approaching the Earth sphere, I was drawn to places of personal significance: homes of old friends, certain social halls where I had once performed, and even a gathering where my name was briefly mentioned. Listening unseen, I heard words of both criticism and praise, all filtered through the distorted lens of memory. Some remembered me fondly, speaking of my charm and creative spark. Others recalled my arrogance or the emotional damage I had inflicted. Their candid assessments triggered pangs of shame, regret, or defensive pride. In that moment I realized how seductive it could be to linger, trying to shape or overhear their opinions. Old vanities threatened to rise, whispering that I should somehow exert an influence to improve my posthumous reputation. Yet I recalled my lessons. Such attachments only anchor a spirit to lower vibrations and hinder genuine progress. Struggling against that pull, I consciously stepped back, praying for the grace to remain indifferent to flattery or condemnation. My path now lay in atonement, not in the ephemeral judgments of the living. Nearness to my beloved. At last I approached the presence of the one who had been so dear to me in life. Guided by a gentle spiritual companion, I stood beside her in a quiet room. She was alone, reading through old letters, some from me, which she had kept even after my passing. I saw her tears and felt the tender longing in her heart. But I also sensed a stirring hope within her, as though she were beginning to accept that life continued on some higher plane, and that love was never truly lost. Overcome by emotion, I yearned to speak, to place a reassuring hand upon her shoulder. Though I could not manifest physically, my guide indicated that I could project a gentle wave of consoling thought and love. Summoning all my sincerity, I did so, imagining my presence enfolding her in a soft embrace of light. She lifted her head slightly as though sensing something, and a subtle calm seemed to settle around her. In that moment, I felt the sweetness of communion that can exist between mortal and spirit, an unspoken language of the heart. My love, deepened by remorse and purified by service, reached her in a way that words never could. Though she would not realize consciously that I was by her side, her grief appeared to lessen. This experience, so poignant and beautiful, also tested my resolve not to overstep my bounds. My guide instructed me that while sending love was permitted, attempting to heavily influence her decisions or intrude on her thoughts would violate the principle of free will. I understood that my presence should be like a warm breeze, not a gust that unsettles. Gratefully, I accepted this limit, resolved to continue my spiritual growth until one day, perhaps, I could help her more openly, if she so invited. A brush with dark influences. Shortly after this tender moment, my guide and I were drawn into a darker situation on the earth plane. We perceived that a troubled man was being tormented by low-level entities who had attached themselves to his aura, feeding on his addictive behaviors. With the man's defenses weakened by despair, these spirits magnified his worst impulses, enticing him to destructive acts. My heart clenched at the sight. I recalled how I, too, had sometimes been subtly influenced to indulge in destructive patterns. Now, from the vantage of the spirit world, I could see how the process worked, how negative entities prey on latent weaknesses. Together, my guide and I tried to radiate a higher vibration of clarity and peace, hoping to break the cycle of influence. For a brief instant, the troubled man paused, sensing a flicker of hope. But the bond with the darker spirits was strong, and they hissed angrily at our presence, seeking to envelop him in a swirl of confusion. To my dismay, the man retreated from our gentle influence, clinging to the false comfort of his addictions. Back in the spirit dimension, my guide reminded me that the man still possessed free will. We could offer an alternative, but we could not force him to accept it. In time, said my guide, he may tire of this downward spiral. Then he will recall this momentary brush with peace, and of his own accord call for help. Mournful but enlightened, I recognized the delicate balance. Compassion compels us to serve, yet we must not impose upon another's freedom to choose their path. Inward reflection and the bonds of love. Returning to the halls of learning, I spent a period in contemplative rest, reflecting on these diverse experiences. I understood that my spiritual progress was closely linked to my willingness to release the old self, its pride, its vain desires, and to embrace love as a unifying force. Each trial illuminated a different facet of that transformation, whether confronting self-doubt, resisting vanity, or grappling with the pain of seeing others reject the light. During this reflective time, I experienced a vivid soul communion, an interior vision of my beloved praying for me. Though she did not know the specifics of my situation, her prayer was that I find peace and forgiveness wherever I was. Her heartfelt wish glowed like a candle in my consciousness, reminding me of our enduring bond. I thanked the higher powers for granting me such a precious link between worlds, joining a circle of soulkin. As my steadiness grew, I was introduced to a circle of spirit friends, souls whose journeys paralleled my own. We met in a gracious courtyard in the halls of learning, where fountains played music that calmed the heart. Some of these companions were artists, poets, or philosophers. Others had led more ordinary lives, but each harbored a keen devotion to service. We found we had much in common, including an impulse to aid those in darkness. Recognizing our shared aspirations, we formed a dedicated group under the mentorship of one of the Brothers of Light, agreeing to pool our strengths for more extended missions. In group meditations, we practiced aligning our energies, visualizing a collective field of radiant compassion that would fortify us against despair or hostility. Before each mission, we gathered to discuss strategy, praying that our hearts remain pure and our intentions humble. Then, guided by our mentor, we descended to the Greylands or to troubled regions near the Earth plane, where we offered assistance to wandering souls. Sometimes we performed small rescues, leading an anxious newcomer to a safe resting zone. Other times, we simply spread a gentle aura of encouragement, hoping a future spark of remorse would draw these souls toward higher help, exploration of the cause and effect of earthly life. Meanwhile, my studies continued. I delved deeper into the law of cause and effect, often called karma. I saw how seemingly trivial decisions on Earth could ripple through the afterlife, setting in motion patterns that either lightened or burdened a soul. A fleeting moment of compassion could open a lasting channel of grace. Conversely, acts of betrayal could sow seeds of bitterness that might take lifetimes or extensive purgatorial processes to heal. This knowledge expanded my sympathy for mortals, who often act without awareness of the spiritual ramifications. I also realized how crucial it was to forgive not just ourselves but others as well, for harboring grudges weighs the soul down, perpetuating cycles of hurt. I committed to releasing any lingering resentments in my own heart, especially towards those who had wronged me or spoken ill of me after my death. By dissolving these shadows, I felt my inner light grow clearer, the power of collective worship. On one occasion, we were taken to witness a magnificent gathering of spirits in a sphere devoted to communal worship. This was not worship in the dogmatic sense, rather it was a grand expression of unity with the divine source. Tens of thousands of souls assembled, their auras intertwining in musical patterns of color and vibration. Transcendent harmonies filled the air, as though the very atmosphere sang with exultation. Caught up in the collective reverence, I felt my spirit expand beyond its usual boundaries, touching something infinitely larger and more serene. The memory of this event left a deep imprint. I understood that worship in the spirit lands is less about ritual than about resonating together in the highest frequencies of love and gratitude. Such gatherings generate a potent field of healing and upliftment, which can then be directed towards souls in darker places. Indeed, the senior guides explained that the spiritual energy generated by these vast congregations is channeled into rescue work, permeating the lower realms with subtle waves of grace that can awaken dormant conscience. It reminded me again how interconnected all realms are and how no soul is truly cut off from divine assistance. A revelatory journey into a darker sphere. Following this exalted glimpse of spiritual unity, I faced perhaps my most daunting test yet. Our circle of helpers was called upon to assist in a particularly desolate region. Unlike the Grey Lands, which were merely gloomy, this sphere was characterized by entrenched malice, a place where vengeful spirits congregated, each one consumed by hatred or a desire to dominate. We were to travel under the protection of a High Brother of Light, whose presence alone could keep the hostile forces at bay, so long as we maintained our composure. Entering this realm felt like stepping into a living nightmare. The skies were oppressively dark, lit only by streaks of crimson that seemed to bleed across the horizon. The air bristled with suspicion and menace, as if every shadow harbored a lurking enemy. Towers of jagged rock rose in the distance, forming a twisted skyline that mirrored the tortured minds of its inhabitants. Yet even in this grim place, we saw potential for redemption. Our High Brother of Light guided us to a particular enclave where a few souls had begun to question their fate. They had once been members of a ruthless band, but some catalyzing event, a memory of earthly love, a pang of remorse, had cracked their hardened shells. These faint stirrings, invisible to most, shone to the higher guides like tiny sparks in the dark. We approached carefully, mindful that other spirits would try to stop us. Indeed, we were confronted more than once by aggressive entities demanding we leave. But the radiance of our leader kept them at a distance. Eventually, we found a cluster of ragged figures huddled near a dismal outcropping of rock. Despair etched their faces, yet a glimmer of hope flickered in their eyes when they beheld our aura. Gently, our leader asked them if they wished a way out. A few snarled in defiance, insisting they needed no help, but one or two mustered the courage to confess their longing for something better. With infinite tenderness, the Brother of Light knelt and spoke to them as equals. He assured them that no past deed was beyond forgiveness if they genuinely repented, that love awaited them in higher realms, if only they would let go of hatred. I watched this scene with awe. I felt my own role expanding, adding my humble vibrations of compassion to the brother's luminous field. Gradually, one of these wretched spirits rose. Trembling, he stepped away from the circle of hatred, ready to follow us. Another hesitated, torn between loyalty to his old comrades and the yearning to escape. In the end, fear prevailed for him. He sank back into the shadows, cursing us half-heartedly. We guided the one who chose hope out of that hellish sphere. Though the journey upward was slow, he was weak from centuries of bitterness. Our love sustained him. Once in a milder region, healers took over, surrounding him with gentle energies that began dissolving the dark imprints. Though far from fully freed, he had made the single bravest choice, to depart the path of hatred and step into the unknown of possible redemption. Aftermath and gratitude. Exhausted but profoundly moved, our circle returned to a safer zone, where we debriefed our experiences with the Brother of Light. He commended us for maintaining composure and love in the face of hostility, explaining that even a single rescued soul is a victory that resonates through the cosmos. Had we succumbed to fear or anger, we would have jeopardized both our mission and our own advancement. I realized that this mission had tested my capacity to remain anchored in compassion despite the overwhelming negativity. In earlier stages of my afterlife journey, I might have lashed out at those mocking spirits or recoiled in fear. But now, guided by higher wisdom, I could hold steady, a testament to the transformation underway in my heart. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I felt a surge of gratitude, not only for the help I had received from the Masters and Brothers of Light, but also for the precious bond with my beloved that continued to inspire me. I saw how each trial, be it personal doubt, the lure of vanity, or the confrontation with malevolence, ultimately served to refine my soul. Each challenge brought me closer to the realization that love is the sole power capable of piercing every layer of darkness. A moment of rest and anticipation. Following these intense experiences, I entered a period of rest in a tranquil region adjacent to the halls of learning. There, amid softly glowing gardens, my circle of helpers gathered to share insights and renew our spiritual vitality. We exchanged stories of the souls we had guided, rejoicing in their small or large breakthroughs. Some among us spoke of returning to the higher realms soon for advanced work in healing or creative arts. Others wished to continue focusing on rescue missions. I felt a pull toward both, but sensed that my destiny might involve bridging these realms through communication, artistry, and compassion. In meditative introspection, I reaffirmed my hope that, one day, my growth would allow me to more directly help my beloved in her earthly journey, perhaps as a whisper of encouragement in her most challenging hours. The fervor of that wish, once tinged with selfish regret, had been purified into a genuine desire for her well-being and spiritual expansion. Thus, I awaited the next summons from the Master of Illumination, ready to embrace whatever lessons still lay ahead. I sensed a new depth forming within me, as though every mission and test had plumbed hidden wells of strength I had never known. In these serene gardens, I allowed my soul to harmonize with the gentle pulses of light that emanated from the higher spheres, trusting that each grace-filled moment would prepare me for the further steps of this vast, ongoing journey through the spirit lands. A summons from a higher teacher. Not long after my period of rest in the tranquil gardens, I received an inner prompting, a subtle yet clear call, indicating that I should seek out the Master of Illumination. Eager to learn what he might have in store, I followed the gleaming pathways through the halls of learning, until I reached the secluded chamber where he often received students. The Master awaited me with a serene expression. Beside him stood a second figure, equally luminous, but different in demeanor, older in countenance and carrying a palpable air of deep wisdom. I felt a wave of reverence as I approached. "Franchezzo," the Master said gently, "it is time for you to receive teachings from one who has traveled even more widely through the planes. This is the elder brother, who serves in a realm beyond our usual sphere of study. He has graciously offered to share insights that may further expand your capacity for service and understanding." I bowed, humbled by the privilege. The elder brother regarded me with kind eyes. "You have worked diligently to refine your nature," he said in a resonant voice. "Now we shall explore truths that extend beyond the immediate tasks of rescue and repentance. For the afterlife is vast, and each new horizon conceals further wonders and responsibilities. Glimpses into celestial harmony." Over the next phase, I was guided into advanced lessons facilitated by the elder brother, sometimes within a specialized hall that shimmered with an ethereal brilliance. There, through a form of spiritual clairvoyance, I perceived faint glimpses of celestial realms that lay above even the luminous gardens I had visited. In these exalted spheres, everything vibrated with a sublime harmony, a unity so complete that it defied the limitations of ordinary thought. The elder brother explained that in these higher celestial planes, souls exist in a state of near-perfect alignment with divine will, free from the more personal struggles of pride, regret, or fear. Such realms, however, are not a final destination. Beyond them, still higher realms of ineffable light stretch toward the ultimate source of all being. With each new ascent, the soul's awareness expands in ways that words cannot fully convey. Humbled by these teachings, I asked whether I might one day attain such lofty heights. The elder brother smiled gently. "Every sincere soul is on a path toward the infinite. Some traverse it more swiftly, others slowly, yet none are excluded from the possibility of drawing ever nearer to divine love. Yet each stage must be earned by genuine transformation. There is no shortcut that bypasses the need to cultivate compassion, purity, and wisdom." The mystery of rebirth. In one particularly illuminating session, the elder brother touched upon the concept of rebirth, which some spirits choose as a path of further growth. Though this idea had been hinted at in my earlier lessons, I had not fully explored it. Now, the elder brother explained that certain souls opt to return to a physical body on Earth or in other realms of material existence in order to resolve karmic debts, refine latent virtues, or accomplish specific missions of service among mortals. He clarified that not all spirits follow the same progression. Some remain in the afterlife for long spans, advancing through the spheres without incarnating again, whereas others voluntarily return to Earth to aid loved ones or further test and strengthen their moral fiber. Rebirth, he emphasized, is neither a punishment nor an automatic cycle for everyone. It is one of many paths, chosen with guidance from higher wisdom, and suited to each soul's unique learning needs. I listened with keen interest, reflecting on how reincarnation might interface with the attachments many spirits feel toward the earth plane. The elder brother cautioned that a spirit must be well prepared, emotionally and spiritually, before it can benefit from a new sojourn in flesh. Otherwise, the soul risks compounding old errors rather than resolving them. In all things, he said, the law of love directs the soul to the experiences necessary for growth. Encounters with advanced souls. As these lessons unfolded, I was also introduced to a small circle of advanced souls who had gathered around the elder brother. Some had chosen never to incarnate again, devoting themselves to guiding and educating spirits in the intermediate planes. Others had completed multiple incarnations and now taught the subtleties of spiritual science. Topics like cosmic vibrations, the healing arts, and the architecture of thought forms across different universes. While I could only grasp a fraction of their insights, I was profoundly inspired by their dedication and humility. Despite the elevated knowledge they possessed, they carried themselves with a simplicity that radiated love rather than superiority. Through their example, I saw how great wisdom invariably blossoms into greater kindness, for knowledge divorced from compassion is incomplete. From them, I also learned that the spirit lands are but a single branch of a vast cosmic tree. Beyond the earthly afterlife lie innumerable realms inhabited by different orders of intelligent life, some similar to humanity, others vastly different. All are connected by the universal principles of love and progress, though the forms and manifestations of these principles may vary. A deeper purge of ego. Alongside these uplifting lessons, I faced a new wave of inner purification. The elder brother's radiance acted like a powerful light, casting revealing shadows on any lingering defects in my character. From time to time, old tendencies, subtle pride in my newfound status, impatience when others did not grasp certain truths, surfaced in me. In this more refined learning environment, such lapses felt glaringly out of place, causing me acute discomfort. Observing this, the elder brother reassured me that these revelations were part of the process. When a brighter lamp is lit, the remaining dust becomes more visible, he said. Welcome these revelations, for they show you precisely where further cleansing is needed. He counseled me to practice an even deeper humility, recognizing that my advancements were the fruits of grace and guidance, not solely my own effort. Indeed, I saw how swiftly I might regress if I neglected prayer and vigilance. More than once, I sought the quiet of the gardens to enter prayerful introspection. There I surrendered my failings to the higher powers, asking that I be shown how to replace each unworthy impulse with a virtue, pride with gratitude, impatience with understanding, and so forth. Gradually, I felt the gentle presence of divine forgiveness working within me, loosening the roots of my old personality traits, co-creating beauty. During this period of purification, the elder brother introduced me to a remarkable creative workshop where spirits experimented with forming landscapes and architectural wonders through collective thought. This workshop was not merely for aesthetic delight. It demonstrated how love and cooperation could mold astral substance into habitats of healing and inspiration. Working side by side with other spirits, I labored to shape a small garden of solace, intended for souls who had emerged from the lower spheres but still bore emotional scars. With careful concentration, we projected images of gentle streams, softly glowing flowers, and shaded groves. Our teacher guided us in infusing each element with a specific uplifting quality: peace, renewal, hope. The cooperative synergy of our group magnified each member's creative power. By participating in this exercise, I grasped how certain regions of the spirit lands had been formed throughout eons by luminous communities, each adding their unique imprint of love and artistry. It reaffirmed the principle that reality, in these planes, is intimately shaped by collective intention. Thus, the more united and elevated the intentions, the more glorious and harmonious the environment becomes. Revisiting the mission of rescue. Though my studies under the elder brother were lofty and inspiring, I remained committed to practical service in the lower zones. Periodically, I joined rescue missions alongside my circle of spirit friends. I found that the insights gained from the elder brother enriched my capacity to comfort despondent souls, for I could now speak with greater conviction about the grandeur of the universe and the inevitability of hope for those who open their hearts. One particularly moving rescue involved a woman who had been tormented in life by profound self-loathing, stemming from abuse and betrayal. Her spirit had dwelled in a realm of desolate greyness, replaying old traumas in an endless loop. Our group approached her gently, surrounding her with an aura of calm understanding. Initially she recoiled, certain she was unworthy of any kindness. Yet by drawing upon what I had learned, I spoke to her about the intrinsic worth of every soul, that beyond the scars and mistakes lies an eternal spark, cherished by the divine. Though tentative at first, she began to weep in relief, as though a long-frozen part of her spirit had finally found warmth. Gradually, she allowed us to guide her to a specialized healing center, where other compassionate spirits focused on restoring self-love and trust. Witnessing her breakthrough, I felt a humble gratitude for the knowledge and empathy I had gained from the elder brother's teachings. The role of prayer and intercession. Another important lesson from the elder brother concerned the power of intercessory prayer, not just from mortal to spirit, but also from spirit to mortal and from spirit to spirit. He explained that sincere prayer directed to the divine or to higher beings forms a channel through which grace flows. It is akin to opening a window in a darkened room, allowing sunlight to pour in. Yet the key is the sincerity and focus of the one who prays. I learned that when we pray for struggling souls, whether incarnate or discarnate, we help them attune, at least momentarily, to higher vibrations. This can soften their negativity, illuminate their confusion, or impart the spark of courage they lack. Conversely, prayers from mortals for loved ones in the afterlife can provide a similar uplift, enabling spirit helpers to more effectively reach those souls. Experiencing this firsthand, our group practiced concentrated prayer sessions where we visualized individuals in darkness, sending them waves of compassionate light. Though we could not override their free will, we noticed that some began to stir, responding to the loving force that surrounded them. In subsequent rescue visits, we encountered a few who reported dreams or visions of a comforting presence, prompting them to reconsider their hopeless outlook. Thus, we recognize that prayer is not a passive exercise but a potent tool for bridging realms. Signs of my growing light. In parallel with these advances, I noticed subtle changes in my own aura. Colleagues in the halls of learning occasionally remarked that my radiance had intensified, though I still felt far less luminous than the truly exalted beings around me. When I ventured into darker regions, I sensed greater resilience against hostile influences. Where once their mocking or threatening presence could easily rattle me, I now maintained a steadier center of calm. Meanwhile, my connection to my beloved on earth grew more delicate and refined. In dreamlike visions, I sometimes beheld moments from her daily life, glimpses of her continuing to cope with challenges, quietly missing me but also forging ahead. In these visions, I sent her silent encouragement, reassuring her that though parted by death, our bond of love was not severed. On occasion, she seemed to sense my presence, looking about with a gentle wonder. Each such moment was a blessing, further confirming the spiritual threads uniting us, inquiries into future paths. As my learning under the elder brother continued, I found myself contemplating the direction of my future. The possibility of eventually incarnating again stirred in me a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. Would returning to Earth serve a higher purpose, such as helping those I once harmed or cultivating virtues I still lacked? Or should I remain in spirit form, devoting my energies to guiding mortals and rescuing souls in darkness? These questions weighed on my mind. Though I felt far from ready to make such a profound choice, I sensed the day would come when I would need clarity on this matter. The elder brother gently advised patience. "You need not decide now," he said. "Focus on fully absorbing your current lessons. When the time is ripe, you will be guided to the path that best fosters your evolution and service." The revelation of my former earthly ties. Around this time, a surprising event unfolded. While assisting in a library of spiritual records, an ethereal archive where the histories and karmic patterns of countless souls are stored, I stumbled upon records of my own ancestry and ties to previous centuries. Guided by a senior librarian spirit, I discovered that my soul had walked the earth more than once, bearing different identities and forging connections with certain individuals whom I met again in later lives. This discovery shed light on some of the profound relationships I had formed in my most recent incarnation, including the woman I so dearly loved. It appeared that we had known each other in earlier times, sometimes as dear friends or siblings, at other times separated by circumstance. Our repeated soul ties had woven a tapestry of mutual influence and support. Reading these records, I felt a surge of wonder and a deeper reverence for the hidden intricacies of life. The librarian spirit cautioned me that this glimpse was granted only to foster my growth, not to satisfy idle curiosity. "We reveal just enough to broaden your perspective," he said. "Too much knowledge of past events, if not integrated with humility, could entangle you in regrets or nostalgic longings. Focus on the lesson that love binds souls across eras, and that every meeting is an opportunity for mutual uplift." A renewed vow. Buoyed by these discoveries and the elder brother's teachings, I felt my commitment to the divine plan intensify. Quietly, in the stillness of a meditation chamber, I made a vow to dedicate all I had become, and all I might yet become, to the service of love's expansion in every realm. If it be best for me to continue aiding souls in spirit form, I would do so wholeheartedly. If, at some future juncture, I were called to incarnate once more, I prayed for the clarity and strength to fulfill that mission without repeating old mistakes. This vow was private, uttered between my soul and the ineffable presence I perceived as divine. Yet I sensed a gentle affirmation reverberate through me, as though unseen witnesses had heard and blessed my resolve. From that moment, I knew I was aligned more deeply than ever with the upward current of growth. Forging forward. As the elder brother's instruction neared completion, he spoke these words of counsel. "Franchezzo, you have ascended through many lessons since your entrance into the spirit lands. You have glimpsed both the depths of despair and the heights of luminous splendor. Continue to unite these insights by serving as a bridge, a messenger who understands the trials of the lower planes, yet holds the vision of higher possibilities." He laid a hand upon my shoulder, and I felt a potent warmth flow into me, as though a mantle of spiritual authority were being conferred. "Go forth in humility and never cease learning. In the measure that you remain pure of heart, divine inspiration will guide your every step, ensuring that you bring healing to those who suffer and wisdom to those who seek." I bowed in reverence, tears of gratitude filling my eyes. It was clear that I would carry the elder brother's teachings wherever my path led next, whether to deeper rescue work, new creative endeavors, or eventually to some mission among mortals. My soul felt buoyed by the knowledge that, despite my flaws, the divine plan had room for me to contribute in ways both subtle and profound. A quiet transition. Shortly thereafter, the elder brother withdrew to his own sphere, leaving me with a gentle promise that I might one day join him in realms of higher service. The Master of Illumination, too, commended me for my perseverance and offered words of encouragement for the tasks ahead. I sensed a shift, a readiness to move beyond the structured lessons of the halls of learning into a more active role in the wide-reaching tapestry of the spirit worlds. Preparing for this transition, I spent my final days in those marble corridors, bidding farewell to dear companions, exchanging blessings with the teachers, and revisiting the luminous library one last time. Each corner of the halls held memories of how far I had come, from a fearful, remorse-laden wanderer to a spirit trained in the arts of compassion and creativity. I carried a humble pride in that transformation, tempered by the knowledge that my journey was far from over. Upon leaving, I felt the warm presence of my beloved's prayers, as though they had woven a luminous thread guiding me onward, No longer did I view my regrets as curses. Rather, they were stepping stones that had led me toward redemption and growth. In that spirit of reverent anticipation, I embarked into the broader expanse of the spirit lands, ready to fulfill whatever duties might arise, confident that each step would bring me closer to the ultimate embrace of divine love. A new chapter of service. Upon completing my studies under the elder brother, I found myself on the threshold of a new phase. My departure from the halls of learning felt both exciting and sobering, for I sensed that the structured environment of regular lessons had been preparing me for more independent work. While I carried forward the wisdom gained, I would now be acting with greater autonomy in the spirit lands. My first inclination was to revisit the transitional realms and the grey lands, where I had once wandered in misery. The memory of my own suffering there stirred compassion for those who still languished, uncertain of their future. Eager to apply my enhanced understanding, I joined a modest band of helpers who specialized in guiding newly departed souls away from earthbound fixations or from the gloom of ignorance. In these missions I drew deeply on the elder brother's insights regarding free will and the transformative power of love. We encountered a variety of souls, some who had died suddenly and were too disoriented to accept their new existence, and others who resisted the notion of any afterlife, convinced they were caught in some dreadful dream. Our task was to gently illuminate their situation, offering reassurance and a path toward rest and understanding. One night, if one can speak of nights in the spirit sense, we came upon a small cluster of individuals, each of whom had perished in a shared accident. Bound together by shock and grief, they seemed to be replaying the moment of their passing over and over, as though unable to believe it had truly happened. Approaching them softly, we emanated a soothing vibration that gradually broke the loop of their trauma. Once they could see us as helpers, we explained that they had indeed crossed into the spirit lands, and that a place of healing awaited them if they would consent to move on. It was heartening to watch the dawning of comprehension on their faces, followed by a measure of relief as they accepted guidance to a serene recovery zone. The challenge of persistent attachments. Not all souls were so ready. We frequently encountered those stubbornly attached to old desires, be it wealth, status, or an unfinished vendetta. Some hovered near earthly locales, trying in vain to influence the living or reclaim lost possessions. With my new perspective, I saw how these attachments acted like chains, dragging them into denser currents of the astral plane. Their auras were often dull or weighed down by unspent emotions. One such spirit had been a powerful financier in mortal life, consumed by the pursuit of money. Even in death, he roamed the offices that once were under his command, furious at seeing others occupy what he felt was still his. Every attempt we made to show him the freedom that awaited, if he released his obsession, was met with scoffing or rage. "I built this empire," he would howl. "I cannot leave it to these inept successors." When we suggested that real fulfillment lay beyond such attachments, he demanded proof. Yet no proof sufficed, for he was determined not to see. Though he did not yield during our visit, we planted seeds, telling him that whenever he grew weary of this ghostly vigil, he had only to call for help. Quietly, we prayed that he might recall our words at some future moment. This encounter reinforced the lesson that each soul must choose its path. We can point to the open door, but we cannot force anyone across the threshold. Return to the realm of my first struggles. Filled with both curiosity and concern, I decided to revisit the very region in the grey lands where I had once drifted, lost and alone. Under the watchful guidance of a more advanced brother, I retraced my old haunts, the shadowy landscapes, the murmuring shapes of disheartened souls, the swirling mists that had so confused me in the early days. The experience felt surreal, like walking through a memory. Yet I approached it now with a kind of compassionate detachment. We encountered a forlorn spirit hunched in the half-light, moaning softly. My heart lurched, remembering when I had held a similar posture of despair. Drawing close, I knelt and asked gently, "What troubles you, friend?" He looked up with sunken eyes, haunted by regret. Through halting words, he explained that he had wronged someone he loved on earth, and now his remorse was unrelenting. Seizing the moment, I shared my own story in brief, describing how I, too, had felt my guilt would devour me, until a gentle guide showed me that repentance could unlock a path of redemption. "Do not abandon hope," I implored. "Turn your sorrow into a prayer for the one you hurt. Wish them well, and wish yourself forgiven. This changes everything." Moved by my sincerity, he allowed me to help him stand and accompany him to a more hospitable area where further assistance awaited. As we departed that doleful spot, I felt a kinship with this soul, certain that my own mistakes had equipped me to speak truth into his darkness, strengthening my bond with my beloved. Despite my many missions, a constant undercurrent of my existence was the longing to watch over and aid my beloved still dwelling on earth. Whenever I had the chance, I sought to draw near her in spirit, to see if I could gently inspire her or cushion her from sorrows. Over time, I sensed that she was growing in her own spiritual awareness. She became interested in higher teachings, reading sacred texts, and attending quiet gatherings where the afterlife and the possibility of spirit communication were discussed. During one of my visits, I observed her in conversation with a friend, timidly expressing her belief that love transcends the grave. My heart swelled to see her take courage, despite societal doubts. I projected silent encouragement, hoping she might perceive a hint of my presence. A soft smile crossed her face, as if responding to an invisible reassurance. These fleeting intimacies sustained my hope that one day she and I might commune more consciously, yet I also realized that she must live her earthly life freely, without being unduly influenced by my yearning. My guide counseled restraint. Give her your love, but do not overshadow her journey. The greatest help is often the gentlest presence. Embracing this counsel, I learned to balance my devotion with respect for her autonomy, trusting that divine wisdom would guide her steps. A broader alliance of helpers. In time, I became part of an expanded network of rescue workers. This alliance included spirits at varying levels of growth, each contributing distinct strengths. Some had once struggled with addictions, making them well-suited to approach earth-bound souls clinging to the same vices. Others had endured harsh life experiences, which now enabled them to empathize deeply with the newly dead who felt terrified or alone. We operated in loosely organized teams, each mission adapting to the unique challenges of the souls we encountered. One major initiative focused on souls emerging from regions of conflict, spirits who had died amid violence, harboring hatred and resentment. Our aim was to mitigate the cycle of revenge that can persist after death, drawing warring spirits into perpetuating their hostilities on the astral plane. By interjecting messages of empathy, we tried to dissolve these simmering feuds and guide them into neutral zones, where they might process their traumas away from combative energies. This work underscored how strife on Earth can spill into the afterlife unless hearts are healed. Delving into mysteries of time. Amid these labors, I found an opportunity to revisit the luminous library I had once seen in the halls of learning. Now, I was better equipped to comprehend some of its subtler volumes, including those dealing with the nature of time. Through guided exploration, I discovered that while earthly time moves linearly from past to future, the spirit worlds experience a more fluid continuum, where the past can be accessed like a living tapestry and future potentials shimmer in possibilities not yet fixed. This revelation helped clarify why I sometimes beheld my beloved's future events in dreamlike visions, or relived my own misdeeds with startling immediacy. It also explained how prayers offered from any point in time could ripple across the spiritual plane, influencing events in ways that defy linear logic. Such mysteries infused me with reverence, reminding me that no soul's destiny is sealed by a single moment. Growth and redemption remain open-ended, woven through countless interconnections, the healing of familial bonds. Another profound area of service involved reuniting families divided by death or unresolved feuds. In cases where earthbound loved ones were unaware of a spirit's continued existence, we facilitated gentle reunions under the right conditions, usually through dreams or in the presence of mediums with sincere intent. When a grieving parent or child sensed the presence of their departed relative, the healing effect could be profound, dissolving guilt or regret that had festered on both sides. Meanwhile, on the spirit side, certain souls carried painful grudges against relatives, refusing to move on until they found resolution. By orchestrating carefully timed encounters, often guided by advanced overseers, we helped them confront their grievances in a supportive environment, aiming to foster forgiveness. The results varied widely. Some souls embraced reconciliation tearfully, while others clung to anger, requiring more time and reflection. Yet each attempt planted seeds of resolution that would in due course blossom into renewed unity. Encounters with misguided teachers. During this period, I encountered an intriguing phenomenon: misguided spirit teachers, who had established small enclaves in the astral plane. These individuals believed they possessed great wisdom and demanded loyalty from their followers, often newly dead souls who were easily swayed. While many such groups began with sincere ideals, some devolved into cultish environments where the self-appointed leaders craved adoration or used fear to maintain power. Visiting one such enclave, our rescue team tried to engage its leader in conversation. He boasted of secret knowledge gleaned from ancient manuscripts and claimed that his group alone possessed the true path to salvation in the afterlife. In reality, his teachings were a blend of half-remembered earthly lore and personal fantasies, woven together to create an aura of mystique. When we gently questioned certain inconsistencies, he reacted with hostility, accusing us of being agents of darkness out to sabotage his mission. Despite his obstinance, a few of his followers listened closely to our quiet warnings, sensing that something was amiss. We offered them an alternative perspective, that humility, openness to higher guidance, and genuine service mark the path of true spiritual progress. A small number decided to leave the enclave, following us to a more balanced learning center where they could explore truth without coercion. Once again, our role was simply to provide opportunity, not force compliance. Unfolding creative gifts. My passion for the arts remained a vital dimension of my spirit life. While service and learning occupied much of my time, I also discovered opportunities to delve more deeply into creative expression. In certain serene zones, akin to grand conservatories or creative pavilions, I joined other spirits in composing music that resonated with the frequencies of compassion. These compositions, crafted by collective thought, formed harmonic streams that could be directed into troubled regions, bringing solace to receptive souls. I also refined my ability to project visual thought forms of beauty, images of gardens, temples, and landscapes radiant with hope. Conveyed through the subtle channels of astral vision, these scenes could inspire those in gloom to imagine a brighter reality and to strive for it inwardly. Sometimes I witnessed a lost spirit pausing in mid-lament, glimpsing the faint outline of a tranquil garden, and gathering the courage to seek help. I marveled that art, even in the afterlife, retained its capacity to elevate hearts toward higher ideals. Nudges from the higher spheres. Now and again I sensed the benevolent scrutiny of more exalted beings, perhaps the elder brother or even more advanced guardians, watching my progress. In fleeting moments of stillness I felt a whisper of encouragement or a light that steadied my resolve. Such touches from above reminded me that I was part of a vast cosmic enterprise, where countless ranks of helpers, guides, and teachers collaborated to uplift all creation. One evening, while meditating alone in a garden of shimmering blossoms, I had a vision of the elder brother. Though he did not appear in full presence, I perceived his form in radiant outline, accompanied by a serene assurance that he continued to guide me from a higher vantage. The sense of connection lifted my spirit, affirming that none of us walk this path unsupported. Even when our mentors step back, they remain attuned to us, ready to intervene if we truly lose our way. Lingering tests of character. Despite my growth, I was not immune to lapses. Occasionally, after a particularly laborious rescue or a setback with a recalcitrant soul, I felt frustration well up within me. A part of me yearned for results, longing to see immediate transformations, forgetting that the speed of another's awakening lay outside my control. In those moments, I had to remind myself that sowing seeds of compassion is never futile, even if the harvest is long in coming. Likewise, I sometimes caught myself comparing my progress to that of other spirits who seemed to ascend more swiftly or create more dazzling thought forms. A faint envy flickered, only to be met by the memory of the elder brother's teachings. Each soul unfolds at its own pace, and the only true measure is the sincerity of one's devotion to love. Recollecting this truth, I would quell my impatience and return to the guiding principle of humility, the grace of interworld communication. Meanwhile, signs began to appear that my beloved was growing more receptive to spiritual impressions. She felt guided in her meditations, occasionally writing down insights that came unbidden. Friends advised her to try to communicate with the other side, though she remained cautious, wanting only genuine contact if it occurred at all. Sensing her openness, I yearned to connect more tangibly. Through prayer, I asked the Brothers of Light if I might be granted a clearer channel to speak words of comfort. In response, a gentle voice in my heart urged patience. All in due time, it seemed to say. Prepare yourself so that your vibration is steady and a suitable condition may arise. Feeling hope stir, I redoubled my dedication to the small acts of service that refine my spirit. I knew that if such a contact were permitted, it would be a delicate operation, requiring protective oversight to ensure no lower entities intruded. My beloved's heartfelt prayers and my abiding love formed a potential link, but conditions on earth had to align, perhaps through a medium or in the quiet hush of her own dreams. Whatever the manner, I trusted that love would find a way to bridge our worlds when the moment was right. A glimpse into future paths. By now I had been in the spirit lands for what, according to earthly reckoning, was a substantial length of time. In the fluid measure of the afterlife, it felt like a series of ever-enriching seasons, each bringing fresh understanding. Yet I sensed that further transformations awaited me, new assignments in still higher spheres, deeper alliances with those engaged in cosmic undertakings, and perhaps even the eventual prospect of another earthly sojourn if that were deemed necessary for my growth. One evening, while gazing into the luminous flow of a quiet stream, I was gifted a faint vision. I saw myself standing on a hilltop bathed in dawn's light, alongside the silhouette of my beloved. Whether this scene represented a symbolic reunion in spirit or a future life's meeting, I could not be sure. But the peace and joy emanating from it was unmistakable. Tears of gratitude flowed as I accepted this glimpse of grace, cherishing the hope it offered, continuing the journey. Filled with these renewed aspirations, I recognized that my role, for now, remained in guiding and uplifting those who, like me, had once stumbled blindly through the lower planes. My vantage point had widened to include not just earthbound souls, but also those in various astral locales who needed a friend, a counselor, or a creative spark. In the grand scheme of the afterlife, my attainments were modest indeed, but they were enough to let me be of use. And so, as I roamed the spirit lands, sometimes in search of lost wanderers, other times convening with peers in higher vibrational pockets, my heart beat with quiet resolve. The swirl of life around me, so diverse and multi-layered, reflected the same law of love that animated every realm. I saw how each earnest gesture of kindness brightened the astral environment, forging links that extended far beyond one's immediate perception. Truly, I was beginning to glimpse how the infinite tapestry of creation wove together souls, experiences, and spheres of existence into one immeasurable harmony. A soft light forward. In the midst of this manifold activity, I never forgot the crucial lesson learned from my earliest guides. All progress depends on the capacity to love and to forgive, both oneself and others. My own liberation from regret had hinged on love's gentle call, and every rescue since then had echoed that principle. Whether illuminating a sullen spirit in the grey lands or lending a calm presence to a grieving mortal, the remedy was the same: love, wielded with patience and reverence for each soul's sovereignty. Thus my journey continued, not as a linear march toward a final destination, but as a continuous unfolding into deeper realms of insight. Whenever I began to feel overwhelmed or uncertain, I recalled the luminous gaze of the elder brother, the quiet assurance of the master of illumination, and the unwavering devotion of my beloved. These supports were anchors of light that guided me onward. I understood that the road ahead might lead me through more trials, perhaps back into the darker spheres, or into new dimensions of spiritual creativity. Yet no challenge could overshadow the steadfast conviction that every corner of existence is ultimately embraced by divine grace. Through my service, I would strive to hasten the awakening of as many as wish to be awakened, until that day when we all might stand in the clear radiance of truth, unified in love. In this enduring hope, I moved forward, step by measured step, ever mindful that each act of compassion, each spark of genuine inspiration, was part of the great tapestry weaving the mortal and spirit realms together in divine harmony. Encouragement from a familiar presence. In the wake of the countless rescue missions and creative endeavors, I experienced an unexpected moment of solitude. Though I still felt driven by love and guided by higher principles, I found myself longing for a more direct sense of personal mentorship. Someone who could both remind me of my growth and gently correct my lingering flaws. It was then, in the hush of quiet reflection, that the brother of hope reappeared, the same luminous guide who had first intervened in my darkest hours after death. His face glowed with empathy as he greeted me. "Franchezzo, you have progressed far since the days when we walked together in the Grey Lands. You carry a stronger light now, but you must also guard against the subtle weariness that comes from unceasing labors. Allow me to speak words of renewal." Overjoyed at his presence, I bowed respectfully, recalling how his gentle support had once felt like the only lifeline amid my despair. He placed a hand over my brow, and I sensed a warm current of energy coursing through me. My burdens lifted, replaced by a calm determination. Though not as exalted as the elder brother, this guide knew me intimately from my most vulnerable stage. His return felt like an affirmation that I was still under loving watch, even in my increased independence, finding balance in service. With Brother of Hope at my side, I resumed my work among the lower spheres, but now with a renewed emphasis on balance. He reminded me that while it is vital to extend compassion to struggling souls, it is equally important to cultivate one's own spiritual wellspring, to seek nourishment through prayer, rest, and uplifting experiences. "A well that is never replenished runs dry," he said. "Let love for others flow from an overflow within your heart, not from the last drops you have left." Heeding this advice, I alternated my rescue missions with intervals of creative communion in the luminous pavilions where artistry and devotion merged. There, I joined with like-minded spirits in crafting harmonious thought forms, celestial paintings, subtle sculptures, and gentle waves of music that could be directed towards souls in anguish. These sessions revitalized me, reminding me that I was not merely a worker running from crisis to crisis, but a growing spirit entrusted with the power to bring beauty into the astral realms. Moreover, in the hush of certain gardens or quiet halls, I prayed intently for the well-being of my beloved on earth. Though my guide cautioned me not to overfocus on any single mortal tie, he acknowledged that my deep bond with her was a source of pure motivation, a reflection of divine love rather than mere possessiveness. Whenever I prayed in that spirit of selflessness, I sensed invisible currents of grace flowing to her side, strengthening her faith and gently stirring her inner receptivity to spirit. The doorway of mediumship. As my connection with her matured, events on Earth began to shift in intriguing ways. Through occasional glimpses, I saw that my beloved was tentatively exploring gatherings, where mediums or spiritual sensitives attempted to bridge communication with those in the afterlife. Though part of her approached these sessions with skepticism, another part longed for confirmation that the love she felt transcending death was not an illusion. Yearning to assist, I sought guidance from more advanced helpers on how to appropriately communicate through a medium. They cautioned me that any such endeavor required careful oversight by higher spirits to prevent interference from mischievous or deceptive entities. A medium's openness can, unfortunately, attract lower vibrations if not protected. Nonetheless, if approached with sincerity and guided by pure love, the mediumistic channel could become a holy conduit of comfort and truth. One day, I was invited to join a protective circle assembled by the Brothers of Light. They had arranged for a faithful medium, an older woman endowed with a gentle temperament and unwavering prayerfulness, to serve as a bridge for certain spirits yearning to reach their earthly loved ones. With the circle's assistance, we would attempt a measured communication, ensuring a clean, uplifting environment free from astral tricksters. When the appointed hour arrived, I felt a subtle shift in vibration as we linked our energies. The medium knelt, whispering prayers for divine guidance. Through this portal we observed a soft column of light forming, akin to a silver beam. At the circle's encouragement, I stepped forward in thought, focusing on my beloved's essence, My heart pounded with anticipation. Though I had no physical body, the emotional intensity felt as real as any earthly heartbeat. Presently the medium began to speak, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of another presence. Mine. I sensed that some essence of my love was flowing through her words. She described an image of me as I had appeared in life, mentioning small details, a favorite artistic hobby, a token of affection I had once given my beloved. Through the circle's harmonizing power, I conveyed a message of reassurance, reminding my beloved of our continued bond and encouraging her to trust her own subtle impressions of my presence. A tremor of emotion rippled through me as I perceived my beloved listening in rapt wonder, tears filling her eyes. Though she could not see me directly, she recognized the authenticity of the details and, even more, the unmistakable warmth of our shared love. For a brief moment, it was as though our hearts touched across the veil. The circle's energies closed the session gently, sealing off any further intrusion from other entities. When it concluded, I retreated, filled with gratitude. Though the communication was limited, brief and somewhat veiled, it confirmed what we had both sensed in our innermost selves, that love indeed transcended the grave. My guide quietly assured me that, with time and continued purity of intention, more such moments might be possible. Consequences of earthly influence. After this touching success, I felt both elated and contemplative. The Brothers of Light reminded me that whenever spirits connect so intimately with mortals, there is a responsibility to uphold. If we are careless in our approach or motivated by vanity, we can inadvertently mislead those on earth, or open them to lower influences. Therefore, each instance of mediumship must be grounded in prayer and ethical caution, an act of sacred collaboration rather than mere curiosity. I took these warnings to heart. Recalling my own earthly flaws, I understood how easily pride or impatience might taint such communications. The spirit lands overflow with mysteries, and it is tempting to use a channel to flaunt knowledge or to meddle in mortal affairs. Yet genuine spiritual contact aims to comfort, enlighten, and inspire free will, never to dominate or impress. My vow was to abide by these higher principles and to encourage my beloved to do the same, ensuring that our bond remained blessed rather than compromised. Journeys into deeper shadows. Emboldened by the success of that mediumistic communion, I resumed rescue work with renewed vigor. The deeper my love for my beloved, the more I understood that all souls, be they mortal or discarnate, are bound together in a network of universal kinship. Each rescue, each moment of solace offered to a grieving or bitter spirit, was a reflection of that same love I had wished to pour out for my beloved. On one assignment, my team ventured into a particularly harsh zone sometimes referred to as the Midnight Realm. Spirits entrenched in cruelty or tyranny gravitated there, forming pockets of malevolent leadership that subjected weaker souls to fear-based manipulations. Here, illusions ran rampant, phantasmal fortresses, shifting labyrinths, and countless traps laid by cunning entities to enslave new arrivals. We came under the direction of a powerful brother of light, whose aura radiated a dazzling gold. Even the fiercest denizens quailed in his presence, though they often tried to hide their fear behind sneers or scorn. As we advanced, we sensed a small cluster of souls who longed to escape but did not know how. Their efforts at flight had repeatedly ended in capture. One man, half collapsed against a jagged wall of black stone, pleaded for help as we approached. Sensing his sincere desire to leave, we surrounded him in a field of calm illumination. The oppressive gloom trembled around us, revealing a path that led to a safer region. Yet no sooner had we begun to guide the man than several dark figures emerged, barking orders for him to remain. They wielded illusions, hallucinations of monstrous apparitions meant to terrify him into submission. In response, our leading brother of light projected a wave of clarity, dissolving the illusions like smoke. I marveled at his authority, realizing that illusions lose their hold when confronted by unwavering truth. The dark figures shrank back, momentarily repelled by the radiant shield. We quickly escorted the trembling soul away, heartened by the knowledge that even in the face of concerted opposition, a sincere cry for deliverance can triumph. The strength found in community. In the aftermath of that harrowing excursion, I reflected on how essential community was in all these endeavors. Though each spirit must ultimately choose its path, few can ascend alone without the encouragement of peers or mentors. I was grateful for the companionship of my fellow workers, and they, in turn, seemed to benefit from my own experiences and perspective. We often met in peaceful intervals between missions, sharing stories of our encounters, trading insights on how best to approach resistant souls, and restoring our collective energy through mutual support. Some of these companions were once my equals in darkness. Now they stood beside me as comrades in the light. The bonds forged in such service felt unbreakable, transcending any differences in background or earthly heritage. Our gatherings also included times of reverent gratitude, where we directed thanks to the higher planes. Together, we acknowledged that our power to rescue or to heal flowed not from ourselves, but from a divine source that fueled all benevolent works. In these gatherings, we recognized that the spirit lands themselves operated on a grand design of interdependence, each realm shaped by the combined influences of its inhabitants. Observing Earth's shifting consciousness. From my vantage, I perceived changes stirring on Earth as well. Though I could not see every event, I noticed that an increasing number of mortals were questioning materialist assumptions and exploring spiritual possibilities. This shift in consciousness opened new avenues of contact and mutual learning between incarnate and discarnate souls. My beloved, in her small corner of the world, was part of this gentle awakening, her open heart resonating with many who yearned for reassurance that love outlasts bodily life. At times, I and other helpers would be permitted to stand near earthly gatherings, lectures, prayer circles, or humble home meetings, where these topics were discussed. We offered unseen inspiration, clarifying impressions, or the subtle nudge that prompted someone to speak an encouraging word. While we could not override free will, we could fan the flames of curiosity and hope, just as one might gently blow on embers to rekindle a fire, the equilibrium of shadow and light. Yet as light expands, so too does shadow sometimes intensify. On Earth, certain forces reacted against these spiritual inclinations, ridiculing them or twisting them for selfish ends. Similarly, in the astral planes, pockets of darkness grew more frantic, as if sensing that the tide of compassion threatened their hold on fearful or bitter souls. I witnessed how some mortals, lured by sensationalism or by unscrupulous mediums, fell prey to charlatans who exploited their grief for profit. This disturbed me deeply, for it tarnished the genuine channels we strove to preserve. The Brothers of Light assured me that truth would ultimately reveal falsehood, but that it was our task to keep shining an honest beacon for those seeking authentic communion. Revisiting my mortal past, in one poignant interlude, I felt guided to revisit the home where I had once lived during my final earthly months. Though it had since passed into other hands, traces of my earthly footprints lingered in the astral substratum. As I hovered near the familiar walls, memories rushed in, joys, regrets, creative musings, and arguments. My vantage had changed so drastically since then that it felt like viewing another person's life. Yet I recognized that the seeds of all I had become were planted in that mortal span. I lingered near what used to be my studio, where scattered canvases and musical scores once captured my restless energy. It struck me that even a short earthly lifetime can spark transformations that resonate through the afterlife. My old passions for music and art were now transmuted into spiritual forms of expression, but they were rooted in the mortal experiences I had cultivated back then. Offering a silent blessing to the present occupants, I prayed that they might find the inspiration or healing that I had overlooked in my ignorance. I felt a subtle shift of energy, as though the place itself welcomed the infusion of goodwill. Turning away, I realized that while my earthly chapter was concluded, its lessons reverberated still, proof that no life is wasted when approached with reflection and openness to growth, a vision of ongoing journey. Gradually my awareness expanded to see my entire path, beginning with my death and confusion, through my rescue, studies and service, woven into a larger tapestry. I glimpsed that beyond the missions in the lower spheres and the creative havens in the higher realms lay still more dimensions of learning, each with distinct vibrations and purposes. The Elder Brothers' teachings had hinted at cosmic vistas, where advanced souls collaborate on grand designs of interplanetary harmony. My heart stirred at the thought that, in time, I might be called to participate in endeavors that spanned galaxies, not just the Earth plane and its immediate astral regions. Yet for all these lofty possibilities, I was content to remain faithful in my current tasks. The clarity of the spirit lands taught me that progress is cumulative and must be earned step by step. Before I could graduate to cosmic spheres, I needed to perfect the art of serving and loving right where I was. Each distressed soul I comforted, each creative impulse I directed toward healing, was a rung on the ladder of ascent, renewed resolve. Thus each day, or whatever passes for days in these realms, I awoke to the same prayer. May I bring more love into the shadows. May I grow in humility and wisdom, that I might not become the shadow myself. Recalling my own vulnerability, I strove to see the spark of hope in every tormented spirit, even when buried under layers of anger or despair. In the luminous intervals, I shared heartfelt joy with my friends, celebrating the victories, however small, that chipped away at the darkness. My beloved remained a shining beacon, her earnest prayers and reflections reaching me in gentle waves. Though we dwelled in separate planes, I felt our hearts moving in tandem, converging in the shared determination to evolve spiritually. Now and then, with permission from the Brothers of Light, I whispered guidance to her inner mind, suggesting steps of courage or forgiveness. While she did not always grasp the source of those impressions, she followed many of them, forging her own progress on Earth, a progress that I believed would draw us ever closer. In these moments, a quiet certainty formed in my soul, that love, once awakened, is the unbreakable thread linking all realms of existence. No regret, no darkness, no gulf of misunderstanding can truly sever those who commit to growing in love's embrace. My own story, begun in pride and ending in remorse, had blossomed into a fresh tale of service, redemption, and continuous unfolding. And if my journey could serve as a testament to others that no one is beyond grace, and that every faltering step can find a path of light, then I was content indeed. A gathering of kindred spirits. In the rhythm of my new life, split between rescue missions, creative collaboration, and gentle communion with my beloved, I felt a stirring that significant changes approached. Subtle signs manifested. I frequently sensed higher vibrations around me, as though invisible watchers assessed my readiness for some new assignment. My circle of friends remarked, too, on an unusual convergence of luminous visitors in the transitional zones. Before long, our team was summoned to a grand assembly in one of the brighter astral realms. It took place in a vast amphitheater fashioned from pale, gleaming stone that shimmered like living pearl. Hundreds of spirits gathered there, all deeply committed to service, each radiating a distinct hue of compassion or wisdom. At the center stood a group of advanced guides, their auras weaving intricate patterns of gold and lavender light. Among them, I recognized the Master of Illumination, his calm presence anchoring the gathering. When the assembly opened, a deep hush fell, almost like a sacred hush in an earthly cathedral. One of the advanced guides spoke, his voice carrying gently through the astral air. "Beloved companions, a special endeavor awaits us, an intensive rescue operation in some of the lowest spheres where new disturbances have emerged. Many souls are trapped by illusions of hatred and vengeance, fueled by fresh conflicts on Earth. They cling to dark energies, unaware that a path of release lies open." The guide surveyed the assembly, eyes brimming with empathy. "We need willing workers who are steady enough to withstand these intense vibrations, yet gentle enough to offer sincere help to the souls dwelling there. Those who feel called must prepare themselves in mind and spirit, for the mission will test your resolve, humility, and unwavering love." I felt an immediate pull. Memories of my own deliverance from the Grey Lands, coupled with the vow I had made to serve, resonated within me. Though a flicker of apprehension rippled through my thoughts, I raised my inner voice in silent readiness. Looking around, I saw dozens of other spirits likewise offering themselves, many of whom wore expressions of earnest determination. The Master of Illumination's gaze fell on me and several of my colleagues, and with a faint nod, he acknowledged our willingness. Intense preparations. Over the following days, or what passed for days in that realm, we underwent special preparations. We gathered in smaller groups, guided by seasoned helpers who had repeatedly journeyed into those darker spheres. They explained the nature of the illusions we might face. Phantasmal armies locked in perpetual battle, labyrinths designed to ensnare souls in bitterness, and manipulative overlords who thrived on fear. We learned specialized techniques for dispersing negative thought forms, holding firm to an interior core of light that no darkness could penetrate, and radiating calm that, when combined with the group's unified intention, could melt the illusions. We practiced through focused meditations, forging a collective field of love so cohesive that a single malicious onslaught would not break our ranks. At the close of each training session, we paused for spiritual communion, invoking blessings from higher spheres. During these moments, I felt an almost tangible infusion of grace, as though a gentle rain of shimmering energy fell upon us, fortifying our minds and hearts. I prayed for the resilience to remain steady if confronted by the hostility or despair that might greet us below. Descent into the deepest shadows. When the appointed time came, our contingent of rescuers gathered at an astral waypoint, a platform of light floating at the boundary between the transitional zones and the truly dark regions. The Master of Illumination and a few other advanced guides oversaw the descent, forming a luminous canopy over us. In hushed reverence, we aligned our intentions, and the vibration around us shifted. It felt as if an invisible portal opened, allowing us to move downward through layers of increasingly dense atmosphere. At first, the gloom pressed upon us like a heavy cloak, and I remembered vividly my earliest days after death, how oppressive that half-light had seemed. Yet now I was equipped with deeper faith and the shared strength of my fellow workers. Even so, the psychic pressure was intense. We began to hear distant wails, shrieks, and rumblings as though the region were alive with tumult. Here, illusions and negative thought forms thickened the very air. Guided by the lead rescuers, we fanned out into smaller task groups. Mine included 4 spirits I knew well. 2 had once struggled with intense guilt, and their empathy for remorseful souls made them effective comforters. Another had a special knack for shattering false visions by projecting a clarifying beam of truth. And I, who had walked this road of regret, carried an enduring compassion that spurred me to persevere, even if souls pushed us away. Rescuing the willing. In those depths, we encountered heartbreaking scenes. Some spirits huddled in corners of crumbling fortresses, believing themselves eternally cursed. Others roamed in gangs, compelled by violent impulses, refighting earthly conflicts in gruesome loops. Now and then, we sensed an individual soul's plea for help, shining like a faint candle. Locking onto that vibration, we navigated toward them, weaving through swirling illusions that tried to misdirect us at every turn. In one poignant case, we found a man who had died consumed by rage after suffering injustice in mortal life. He lingered in a self-imposed prison, walls of smoky black that reflected his hatred. Our clarifying companion projected a narrow beam of golden light, piercing the murk. We saw him cowering inside, fists clenched, eyes blazing with the memory of betrayal. Approaching with caution, we extended compassion. My companion softly addressed him. "Brother, no one denies the wrongs you suffered, but you need not remain chained to that moment of pain. There is a path beyond vengeance." At first he lashed out, spitting bitter words, but the more we listened without judgment, the more his rage faltered. Slowly, as if uncertain, he asked, "Why do you care about me? Everyone else either feared or abandoned me." I shared how I too had once believed no one cared, until a merciful guide proved me wrong. "Don't let your anger define you," I pleaded. "A better destiny awaits." A glimmer in his eyes betrayed his desire for relief from this endless torment. Step by step we led him through those smoky walls. Though trembling, he allowed us to guide him to a safer zone, a sort of astral refuge established by higher helpers for precisely these broken souls. As we departed, I felt a wave of relief emanating from him, like a long-held breath finally released. Encounters with the hostile. Not all interactions ended so well. More than once we ran into bands of hostile spirits who saw our rescue work as a threat. They spewed venomous words and conjured horrific apparitions, hoping to frighten or repel us. In one such episode, we confronted a self-appointed chieftain who surrounded himself with an army of spirits still thirsting for war. Through astral illusions, he appeared 10 times his normal stature, brandishing a blazing sword that crackled with wrathful energy, yet our group's cohesive aura held firm. We stood our ground, radiating a calm that undercut the drama. Though we could not forcibly redeem those who chose darkness, we could protect any souls seeking escape from that tyranny. Unable to sway us, the chieftain and his minions retreated with curses, leaving behind a few uncertain followers who, though afraid, took the chance to approach us. We escorted them from the battlefield-like realm into gentler surroundings, hoping they might rediscover their inherent capacity for peace. These skirmishes were draining. At times, illusions hammered at our senses with unrelenting fury. But always, the memory of my own rescue and the image of my beloved's prayers gave me the inner steel to press on. I leaned on the supportive energies of my teammates. Together, we were far stronger than any one of us alone. The care of healing stations. Throughout this large-scale operation, we made frequent use of healing stations, oases established by higher spirits in intermediate zones. Here, newly freed souls could rest, release traumatic memories, and receive specialized nurturing. Skilled healers used vibrational music, colored light, and gentle thought forms to mend psychic wounds. Many souls arrived barely coherent, trembling from the horrors they had endured. But under this tender care, they gradually stabilized, learning that they, too, were loved. I was deeply moved by the commitment of the healer spirits, many of whom had devoted countless years to this work. Their patience seemed boundless as they sat with each traumatized newcomer, whispering soft reassurances and bathing them in comforting energies. With time, those souls became ready to face the truth of their conditions, acknowledge their misdeeds or hurts, and embark on the path of repentance and self-forgiveness. Several times I brought newly rescued individuals to these stations, remaining briefly by their side before returning to the darker areas. Often I witnessed the moment they realized they were no longer alone, that help was real, that hope was not a lie. Those expressions of dawning belief were among the greatest rewards I knew. The toll on rescuers. This intense rescue operation carried a cost for the rescuers themselves. Despite our best efforts to shield ourselves, the constant exposure to lower vibrations could wear on our energy. Some workers felt fatigue, akin to spiritual exhaustion, and needed to withdraw to higher spheres for recovery. A few, shaken by repeated confrontations, questioned their capacity to continue. Brother of Hope appeared periodically to reinforce our morale, reminding us of the inexhaustible wellspring that flows from the divine heart. Draw upon that universal love, he advised. If you rely only on your personal reserves, you will falter. Let each prayer, each breath, connect you anew to the source which never fails. Taking his counsel to heart, I discovered that focusing on gratitude during short breaks helped me replenish my vitality, like breathing fresh air after choking smoke, glimpses of collective impact. As the rescue mission progressed, I began to notice subtle but significant changes in certain corners of the lower spheres. Gloomy landscapes seemed less impenetrable, illusions lost some of their potency. It was as if the combined efforts of all these teams were gradually undermining the strongholds of darkness, loosening the hold of fear and hatred on countless souls. Though much remained to be done, each success left a lasting imprint. Some advanced guides suggested that these improvements also paralleled shifts in Earth's vibration. They remarked that whenever mortal conflicts subsided, or whenever human hearts opened to empathy and reconciliation, corresponding changes occurred in the astral worlds. Conversely, new outbreaks of war or cruelty on Earth generated fresh pockets of unrest in the lower planes. Thus, a dynamic interplay bound earthly humanity to the discarnate realms. Recognizing this, many of us doubled our resolve to inspire peace, wherever possible. Meeting an old adversary. One of the mission's most startling episodes occurred when I unexpectedly encountered a figure from my past, an old adversary who had once resented me bitterly during my earthly life. In that earlier existence, our disputes had been largely my fault, fueled by my vanity and temper. After death, he had lingered in bitterness, wandering the darker astral regions with a deep-seated grudge. By the time I began my rescue work, we had lost track of each other. Now, in the midst of this operation, I found him in a half-collapsed citadel, overseeing a small group of spirits bound to him by fear. He recognized me immediately, scowling in a flash of old hostility. "Ah, the saintly Franchezzo," he said with dripping sarcasm. "Come to lecture me on repentance, I suppose." A rush of guilt flared in me, recalling how our animosity had started with my own arrogance. Yet I kept my composure. "I'm here to offer help, to anyone who wants it," I replied quietly. "Not to lecture." Snorting, he spat back. "I'd rather reign in these ruins than beg forgiveness from your sanctimonious crowd." Still, I sensed something beneath his bravado, an exhaustion, a longing for release from the cycle of hatred. My teammates and I projected an aura of acceptance, not condemnation. After a moment's silence, I stepped closer. "Our past was full of mistakes, mine as well as yours. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, but we don't have to remain in this enmity forever." He eyed me warily, perhaps startled by the candor of my apology. Tension crackled in the air. One of his underlings, trembling, looked on as if hoping for our help, but afraid to speak. Eventually, my old adversary turned away with a curt wave of dismissal. "Go, I don't need your pity." I bowed slightly, acknowledging his choice. Before leaving, I addressed his followers. "If any of you wish to leave, we can show you how. No force, no compulsion." A few cast anxious glances at their leader, who made no move to stop them. Emboldened, one stepped forward, then another. We led them to a safer route, hoping that even a small exodus might plant seeds of reconsideration in the leader's heart. Afterward, I prayed fervently for him. Despite his rejection, I believed that the genuine regret and forgiveness I felt could still reach him in some quiet moment. The Brothers of Light often teach that one heartfelt apology, sincerely offered, resonates in the astral plane, softening barriers that pride has erected. Whether he would heed that resonance was, of course, up to him. Culmination of the mission. The multi-layered rescue effort spanned what seemed an extended cycle, though precise time is hard to measure in these realms. By the end, we had guided untold numbers of souls out of oppressive illusions, transferring them to recovery stations. A significant measure of darkness had receded, though it was hardly obliterated. In free will lies the potential for both redemption and relapse. Nevertheless, the mission was deemed successful by the advanced guides, who praised the devotion of all involved. We convened again in the pearlescent amphitheatre, where the Master of Illumination and other high guides thanked the rescuers. Their gratitude echoed through our souls, imparting a luminous joy that transcended earthly admiration. I thought of my beloved, hoping she might sense on some inner level that our efforts had brought a bit more light into the cosmos. At this gathering, those of us who had participated received an infusion of renewal, a gentle uplifting that soothed our weariness. Some were invited to ascend temporarily to higher rest spheres, places of serene brilliance where advanced healing energies revitalized them. Others, including me, felt content to remain near the transitional zones, poised for the next assignment. My love for rescue work had grown immeasurably, for it united all I had learned: humility, empathy, creative imagination, and an unshakable belief in the power of redemption. A brief reprieve and reflection. In the lull that followed, Brother of Hope guided me to a tranquil clearing bathed in soft turquoise light. There we reviewed the highlights of the mission and discussed my ongoing path. He commended the steadiness I had shown, even in confronting my old adversary, reminding me how far I had come from the wounded, remorse-laden wanderer he once found. Yet he also gently pointed out areas needing further cultivation, my tendency at times to shoulder too much responsibility and blame myself if a rescue failed. True spiritual service, he emphasized, means offering love without attachment to outcomes. Nodding in acceptance, I took his hand, murmuring my thanks for his unwavering guidance. He smiled, serene and encouraging. "Franchezzo," he said, "your soul is ripening. Continue in faith, for each new trial, each new act of mercy refines you further. The tasks may grow larger, but so too will your capacity to meet them. Trust that divine grace always matches the need." With that gentle counsel echoing in my mind, I closed my eyes, breathing in the soothing atmosphere. I recalled the luminous chain of mentors in my life after death, from my earliest guide to the master of illumination, to the elder brother and others unseen. Each had poured love into me, molding my spirit from despair into hope, from ignorance into wisdom. Their legacy now blossomed in my own rescue work, forming an endless circle of giving and receiving, ever onward. Though uncertain what fresh challenges lay on the horizon, I felt a deep readiness to embrace them. My devotion to my beloved had become inseparable from my devotion to all souls, since love is never an isolated flame. By its nature, it spreads warmth to every corner it touches. In that spirit, I rose from the turquoise clearing, feeling the gentle pulse of universal life around me, and prepared to continue my journey through the spirit lands, confident that every step forward was a step deeper into the boundless embrace of divine love. Quiet interludes and inner growth. After the intense rescue operation concluded and the grand assembly disbanded, I found myself in a period of relative calm. My most pressing tasks were momentarily eased, and I spent time in contemplative gardens, allowing the lessons of recent endeavors to settle into my being. Though the spirit lands are ever active, there are times when a soul is gently guided to rest and integrate new understandings, just as one might pause after a stretch of strenuous work on earth. In these quiet interludes, I visited the creative pavilions more frequently, experimenting with music and visual thought forms. It amazed me how the spirit's creative expressions could expand seemingly without limit. In one project, I joined a group of artist spirits to craft an immersive scene, a lush glade wrapped in morning mist, where radiant flowers emitted subtle tones that harmonized into a gentle chorus. We intended this thought-created glade to be a transition space for newly rescued souls. Once shaped and stabilized by our unified focus, it would serve as a temporary refuge where confusion could dissolve in the warmth of living beauty. This process was a form of spiritual artistry that demanded both technical skill, knowing how to manipulate astral substance, and pure intention. If anyone in the group lapsed into pride or selfish motives, the glade's resonance faltered, the flowers dimmed, and the entire environment destabilized. Therefore, the exercise served as a powerful lesson in humility and collective synergy. We discovered that the more selfless our purpose, the more vibrant and enduring the creation. Reflections on free will and karma. Meanwhile, I continued my personal studies in the luminous library. With renewed clarity, I delved into volumes that explored the intricacies of free will, how each soul's choices shape its destiny, forging links of cause and effect. I saw how in mortal life we often attribute our fortunes or misfortunes to chance, while in the spirit lands we come to grasp that each act, thought, and motive imprints itself on our subtle body, drawing us toward realms or experiences that match our inner condition. This law of cause and effect, often called karma, is not arbitrary punishment or reward. Rather, it is the unfolding of energies we set in motion. Compassion begets expanded opportunities for service. Cruelty or selfishness contracts the soul, binding it to lower realms until repentance softens those knots. Observing how this played out across the myriad cases in the library, I felt both awe and humility. There was no hidden corner in the grand design that escaped these spiritual laws, yet mercy was woven into every thread. Whenever a soul sincerely chose to grow in love, help arrived, even if it took 1,000 steps for that seed of remorse to bloom into transformation. Among these records, I also saw glimpses of Earth's evolving tapestry. Great cycles of upheaval, wars, revelations, cultural renaissances appeared as waves in a vast ocean. Each wave, I realized, had an astral counterpart, shaping how souls in the afterlife congregated or clashed. It became clear that the dance of souls was never confined to one plane, the mortal and immortal aspects intertwined like two sides of a single coin, invitations to higher spheres. During this interval of rest, I also perceived occasional beckonings from higher realms. Spirit friends who had advanced further in purity or attained special mastery sometimes descended in shimmering forms, inviting me to glimpse their rarefied abodes. On one such occasion, a radiant mentor, one of the elder brother's associates, took me to a sphere suffused with pastel light, where the very atmosphere seemed alive with gentle melodic currents, Immense structures floated like crystal clouds, each reflecting prismatic hues. The mentor explained that this realm served as a center for teaching advanced healing arts. Here, spirits studied methods for rebalancing profound psychic injuries, not just among individuals, but also in collective astral communities. The mentor hinted that as I matured, I might undertake a deeper apprenticeship in these arts, enabling me to address more complex cases of soul trauma. While I felt both gratitude and unworthiness, the mentor encouraged me. Every earnest effort you have made thus far has prepared you to help in ways you cannot yet imagine. Trust that your journey unfolds at the perfect pace. I returned to the intermediate zone with my heart brimming with hope. Though the brilliance of that higher sphere had overwhelmed me at moments, I sensed pockets of my own shadowy impulses recoil from the pure light. It fueled my resolve to continue refining myself so that I might one day dwell there more comfortably. Further communion with my beloved. Throughout this period, my connection to my beloved on earth remained a cherished thread. In meditative states, I saw her forging new friendships and further developing her spiritual interests. Occasionally, she attended services or circles where afterlife truths were discussed, and in hushed moments, I stood by her side unseen, transmitting gentle encouragement that she might trust her inner discernment. One evening, with permission from the Brothers of Light, I attempted another brief communication through the same medium we had once used. The circle prayed fervently, invoking protection. This time, the channel felt a bit clearer. I was able to convey not just a few validating details, but also an outpouring of love and gratitude for her prayers. My beloved's eyes filled with tears as she recognized nuances of my manner that the medium, a stranger, could not have fabricated. The release of her grief and the flicker of joy in her gaze filled me with indescribable fulfillment. However, mindful of the earlier warnings, I kept the message concise and hopeful, avoiding any inclination to counsel her on worldly decisions or events. The higher principle was that each mortal must chart their path using free will. I could merely whisper the reassurance that she was never truly alone, that love surrounded her in ways beyond physical sight. When the session ended, a calm hush settled over us, and I withdrew, heart aflame with renewed dedication. In-depth missions to earthbound spirits. Feeling reinvigorated, I resumed more direct outreach to earthbound spirits, those souls who clung to earthly scenes and vices, unaware or unwilling to accept their post-death state. Some remained locked in patterns of addiction, frequenting taverns and opium dens, trying to re-experience sensations they could no longer truly access. Others lingered around family members, attempting to control or protect them, not realizing they were hampering both themselves and their loved ones. Joined by a small band of helpers, I approached these earthbound spirits carefully. We waited for moments of vulnerability, when the spirit grew disheartened by its inability to indulge or influence the living, and then gently introduced ourselves. Often they rebuffed us at first, scoffing at any suggestion they had died or that a better realm awaited. Yet, with consistent compassion, we cracked open the door of their denial. For those who listened, we offered to guide them away from the chaotic earth plane to a tranquil region where they could release their cravings and reconcile with their new reality. One particularly poignant case involved a mother who had passed suddenly, leaving behind a child she adored. Consumed by worry, she hovered constantly near the child, causing subtle disruptions in his sleep and emotional state. When we approached, she wailed that she must protect him at all costs, that stepping away would be an act of abandonment. My heart ached at her devotion, but I saw the strain she was causing both to her child and to herself. Softly we explained that more qualified living guardians and extended family were caring for him, and that her presence, in its current unsettled form, only stirred confusion in his aura. It took much persuasion, yet at last maternal love overcame her fear, and she trusted us enough to depart to a sphere of healing. Later we received word that her child's well-being improved markedly once her anxious influence was lifted. Revisiting karmic threads. Meanwhile, fresh insights into my own karmic threads continued to surface. Now that I had faced certain adversaries and recognized the shape of my earthly errors, deeper layers of understanding emerged. Sometimes in quiet reflection, I saw lifetimes prior to my most recent one where patterns of pride or impulsiveness had recurred. I glimpsed relationships that repeatedly tested my capacity to choose empathy over self-absorption. Yet rather than feeling overwhelmed by these revelations, I sensed a growing calm. Each realization reminded me that the universe is patient. Souls are given ample opportunities, life after life or realm after realm, to refine themselves. Indeed, the very ties binding me to my beloved, to certain friends, and even to former rivals, had been woven across multiple eras. A gentle wonder arose in me at the elegant intricacy of it all, a cosmic tapestry, in which each thread, though seemingly isolated in one lifetime, entwined with many others through the timeless lessons of love, regret, reconciliation, and grace. Emerging soul guidance roles. As I continued helping earthbound spirits and assisting in transitional zones, I felt a subtle shift in how I functioned within these teams. Colleagues began turning to me for counsel, especially on matters of remorse and heartbreak. My own journey, from the pangs of guilt to the hope of atonement, served as living testimony that no soul was beyond redemption if it truly yearned for healing. I never presumed to be a grand teacher. Indeed, the memory of my failings kept me humble. But I recognized that my empathy had ripened into a gift I could offer freely. Occasionally, I was asked to mentor newly awakened rescuers who wished to serve in the Greylands. Such novices were often startled by the raw energies and illusions they encountered. I guided them gently, suggesting ways to maintain an inner anchor while facing dark vibrations. Sometimes, all it took was a calm presence and a reminder to keep compassion at the forefront, to see even the most hostile spirit as a wounded being crying out for release. In this manner, I felt the seeds once planted by my own guides sprouting within me, bearing fruit for others. It was a humbling joy to realize that we perpetually pay forward the care we have received. Indeed, each wise word the elder brother had offered me now found echoes in the advice I gave to these newcomers. Through such continuous giving and receiving, the spirit lands blossomed in an endless exchange of spiritual nourishment. A visit from the elder brother. One day, while resting in a lovely orchard of soft, translucent trees, I sensed a brightening of the atmosphere. Looking up, I beheld the elder brother approaching, his features aglow, though still possessing that gentle humility that characterized him. With reverence I rose to greet him. He embraced me warmly, as one would a trusted friend. "It has been some time, dear Franchezzo," he said, his voice resonant with kindness. "I see you have grown stronger in the love you share. Much has changed since our last lessons together." Humbled, I thanked him for his watchful guidance, confessing my occasional uncertainties. The elder brother smiled. "Uncertainties are natural, for the path of growth has no rigid map, yet your heart's sincerity keeps you aligned with divine purpose." He then shared that my progress had not gone unnoticed in higher spheres. Certain advanced communities were opening opportunities for those who had proven diligent and compassionate in the lower planes. These opportunities might include more direct influence on Earth's spiritual evolution or deeper participation in large-scale healing projects across multiple astral regions. "In time," he added gently, "you may even be offered a choice about whether to remain a guiding spirit here or to incarnate again, should that path serve your ongoing development. There is no pressure, only an invitation to consider how your gifts might unfold most fruitfully." A swirl of feelings overtook me. Part of me yearned to continue bridging the gap between Earth and the spirit, perhaps becoming a steadier presence for my beloved and others in need. Another part sensed that returning to mortal existence, though fraught with risks, might further purify and expand my soul. The elder brother counseled patience. "You will know when your readiness ripens. Meanwhile, deepen your service here. Trust that the next step will reveal itself in perfect timing." Earthly glimpses and the flow of time. In the following weeks, I found myself increasingly drawn to observe Earth's changes. Through regulated sessions of clairvoyant watching, I saw hints of progress, scattered movements promoting compassion, individuals embracing altruism, and the slow but real broadening of spiritual inquiry. Yet darkness persisted in many corners. Conflicts ravaged some lands, while cynicism and greed festered in the hearts of others. This dual dance, I realized, was part of Earth's evolutionary tapestry, reflecting the free will of billions of souls. I also glimpsed my beloved navigating her daily life. Although she had moments of sorrow and longing, she radiated a subtle glow that spoke of inner faith. My heart soared to see her forging meaningful connections, occasionally volunteering to help those less fortunate. It seemed she was guided by an impulse of charity that paralleled my own service in the astral realms. A part of me wished I could reveal the fullness of my presence, but I recognized that such disclosure might disrupt her free will. It was enough to watch her steps with silent admiration, learning the art of spiritual inspiration. As I contemplated how to best assist mortals, I joined a specialized course on the art of spiritual inspiration. Led by advanced spirits skilled in gently influencing earthly minds, this course emphasized that true inspiration never overrides free will or manipulates. Rather, it introduces sparks of insight or encouragement, which a person can then accept or reject. The subtlety of this process requires both patience and respect for the mortal's autonomy. We practice sending clear, loving thoughts toward imaginary human scenarios. An artist struggling with self-doubt, a mother weary from caring for sick children, a teacher trying to uplift discouraged students. Each scenario taught us how to tune our thoughts to the specific emotional frequency of the mortal, offering a glimmer of hope precisely where it might take root. We also learned that if we lapsed into judgment or urgency, the connection faltered and our impulses could be misconstrued or blocked. This training delighted me because it harmonized with my long-standing desire to guide others gently, as my own guides had done for me. Upon completing these lessons, I felt more equipped to send helpful inspirations not only to my beloved, but also to any mortal whose heart quietly opened to such assistance. Over time, I sensed my spiritual influence reaching broader circles, writers, healers, or even lonely souls searching for meaning. Though I did not know them personally, I recognized the unity of all souls within the web of divine life, a beacon of reconciliation. During one noteworthy mission, we discovered that my old adversary, whom I had encountered in the lower realms, was finally tiring of his lonely struggle. Encouraged by a faint glimmer of remorse, he had ventured to the edges of his dismal domain, searching for a way out. Hearing of this, I joined a small party that set out to find him, offering a renewed invitation to reconciliation. With each step, I remembered the heated confrontations of our shared past, aware that part of his bitterness arose from the hurt I had inflicted in mortal life. When we found him, he looked exhausted, his once fierce aura dimmed to a greyish flicker. Though pride still shadowed his gaze, I saw that he was no longer as resistant. Again I approached him gently. "I bear you no ill will," I said. "If you desire it, we can help you leave this place." For a moment he trembled, torn between fear of humility and longing for release. "Why would you help me?" he muttered. "After everything we've done to each other." Taking a deep breath, I acknowledged the shared fault. We both hurt and misunderstood each other, but that was another life, another state of mind. If we hold on to that old strife, it chains us forever. Let me make amends by guiding you to a calmer realm. If you can accept it, perhaps we both find peace. Something in my tone seemed to touch him. A faint tear glistened in his astral eyes. Finally, with a shudder, he nodded. We led him through the labyrinth of shadows he had once commanded, forging a path toward a transitional zone. Along the way, illusions arose, apparitions of hatred, past regrets, but we dispelled them by focusing on the sincerity of forgiveness. Reaching a healing station, he collapsed in relief, as though a crushing burden had fallen from his shoulders. Standing nearby, I felt an immense sense of release, as if an ancient knot in my soul's tapestry had loosened at last. I prayed that this was the turning point for him, and for me. Whatever the future held, we had chosen to break the cycle of enmity, making space for understanding to blossom, the seeds of a greater calling. In the days that followed, I reflected on how these experiences continually refined my spirit. Reconciling with one who had been an enemy in life highlighted the transformative power of love and humility. Through rescue missions, creative works, mediumistic encouragement, and soul inspiration efforts, I was discovering that every facet of my afterlife revolved around the central principle: We are here to heal, to uplift, and ultimately to unite in love. It struck me that my time in the spirit lands had become a masterclass in living for others. Once, I had lived primarily for myself, pursuing artistic glory and fleeting pleasures. Now, almost every joy I experienced flowed from serving the well-being of another soul, be it mortal or discarnate. This shift felt both humbling and liberating, as though my spirit had been rerouted from a narrow channel of self-interest into a vast current of universal compassion. More and more, I sensed that I was being quietly prepared for an even larger commitment, perhaps an ongoing role as a spirit guide to mortals, or a position in one of the advanced spheres focusing on global or cosmic projects. The elder brother's hint about a future choice lingered in my thoughts. Would I remain in these astral worlds indefinitely, or accept the challenge of reincarnation to further refine my character? Neither path was inherently superior. Each was a sacred avenue of learning. For the time being, I yielded the answer to the divine flow, trusting that my next steps would reveal themselves naturally, just as every new opportunity had arisen when I was ready. Approaching a threshold. As I continued meeting with my circle of colleagues, I shared these reflections. Some were drawn to the idea of incarnating again in a more enlightened epoch of Earth's history, believing they could accelerate global compassion. Others, who felt a special calling in the astral realms, spoke of dedicating themselves to indefinite rescue and teaching endeavors. No one option was universally right. Each soul's blueprint, shaped by personal karma and divine invitation, guided them toward the next horizon. In me, a gradual sense of completion formed, as though I were nearing the end of a major chapter in my post-mortem journey. My earliest mentors, Brother of Hope, the Master of Illumination, the Elder Brother, had instilled in me the essential lessons needed to transform from a despairing wanderer into a purposeful worker. The question now was how best to apply those lessons on a still larger scale. Simultaneously, the bond with my beloved ripened. Through glimpses of her earthly days, I saw her blossoming into new heights of compassion, forging connections that allowed her to help orphans and the elderly. Though we did not converse openly, she seemed to feel my presence in her prayers, acknowledging some unseen support that warmed her heart. Observing her progress filled me with gratitude, as if our love had expanded to touch many lives. It seemed we were both fulfilling the vow once whispered in our final mortal moments, that love would endure and evolve no matter what worlds we inhabited. The ever-widening path, recognizing this convergence of inner readiness, external opportunity, and the growth of my dearest ties, I felt a gentle stirring of anticipation. Something lay ahead, a pivotal choice or a threshold crossing that would anchor my next phase of existence. While the details remained blurred, I sensed an undercurrent of guidance urging me forward. The spirit lands had shown me that each threshold, however daunting, revealed new vistas of knowledge and service. Concluding each day in prayer, I bowed my spirit before the source of all love, offering myself as an instrument of healing for as many souls as my modest capacity allowed. My journey, I understood now, was not solely about escaping lower vibrations or amassing spiritual wisdom for my own sake. Rather, it was about channeling the grace I had received into tangible acts of mercy, trusting that the same boundless love that rescued me would rescue all who sincerely longed for it. Thus, with open-hearted reverence, I awaited the next summons, ready to step beyond my familiar tasks, if so called. Whether that meant rising to a higher realm of creative healing, descending again into the darkest pits to save even more lost souls, or returning to Earth's stage in a brand new role. Whatever my destiny, I stood at peace, anchored in the certainty that love, unceasing, unbounded, would guide each footstep along the ever-widening path to union with the divine. A stirring of new possibilities. In the period following my reunion with the elder brother and my reflections on reincarnation and service, I felt a gentle yet persistent sense that my spiritual trajectory was reaching a decisive crossroad. My aspirations, woven from love, curiosity, and gratitude, pressed me to seek a clearer understanding of what lay before me. I sought guidance in tranquil meditations, calling on the luminous mentors who had watched over my progress. During one such meditation, as I rested in a serene courtyard of pale marble shot through with silver light, I sensed an opening in the atmosphere, a soft brilliance, reminiscent of a slowly parting veil. From it emerged a familiar figure, Brother of Hope, whose countenance radiated kindness. Beside him stood another presence whose form was subtly veiled yet undeniably majestic. I sensed at once it was the elder brother, grown even more radiant than when I had last seen him. They greeted me with a warmth that sent waves of reassurance through my being. Brother of Hope explained that the two of them had come to address my inner questioning. The elder brother smiled gently. "Franchezzo, you have advanced admirably. Now the time is ripe to consider your next major step, whether to continue as a spirit helper in these astral realms or to accept another incarnation on Earth. The choice is yours, and must flow from love rather than compulsion." My heart pounded with awe and a touch of trepidation. I looked from one to the other, seeking a sign of which they believed best. Yet their expectant silence affirmed that only I could truly decide my path, guided by the deepest stirrings of my soul. The Counsel of Wisdom. To aid my discernment, Brother of Hope offered a detailed picture of my potential futures. If I remained in the spirit lands, I could move on to advanced spheres of healing, creativity, or teaching, eventually assuming a role similar to that of the Master of Illumination, counseling spirits in transition, orchestrating rescue missions, and fostering higher forms of artistic or scientific endeavor. In these realms, I would hone my understanding of cosmic laws, possibly assisting with the spiritual guardianship of entire earthly communities or forging connections with other inhabited worlds. On the other hand, an earthly reincarnation would thrust me once more into the thick of mortal limitations, with no conscious memory of my afterlife knowledge. My trials might be formidable, humbling experiences designed to uproot any remaining seeds of pride, impatience, or fear. I might wrestle again with heartbreak, illness, or injustice. Yet each challenge could serve as a crucible for distilling love and wisdom in a more visceral, embodied form. Moreover, I would have the chance to meet my beloved in the flesh, if such an intersection served both our souls' growth. The elder brother pointed out that certain karmic threads I had unraveled in spirit could be woven into a new earthly tapestry, further refining my character. To my surprise, they mentioned yet a third possibility. I could partially bridge these realms and Earth by serving in the sphere of direct inspiration, a vantage point from which I could guide chosen mortal individuals, occasionally co-creating works of healing or education through their minds and hearts. Such a mission would not require another incarnation, but would carry its own responsibilities, demanding I maintain an unbroken purity of motive, lest I inadvertently sway mortals' free will or overshadow their unique life lessons. Praying for clarity. Deeply moved by these prospects, I asked permission to withdraw for a time, that I might pray and listen to the voice of my soul. The elder brother nodded. "Consider carefully, Franchezzo. Your experiences have shown you the many facets of divine love. Let that love guide you in selecting the path that resonates most with your present purpose." In a quiet corner of a radiant garden, where flowers pulsed with soft living color, I knelt and offered my entire being to the source, silently asking for insight. I reviewed my journey from the moment of death, the regrets and sorrow that spurred my first rescue, the lessons in humility, the blossoming of compassion, my artistic explorations, my rescue missions, and the tender communications with my beloved. Every step had shaped me into someone far different from the man who once lived for applause and fleeting thrills. I realized, too, that my love for her, though once fraught with guilt, had become a pure devotion that radiated outward to all souls. It was as though the personal bond that had anchored me in remorse now served as a springboard for universal compassion. Picturing her, I wondered, would a physical reunion on Earth accelerate our mutual growth? Or had we reached a point where each might continue evolving independently, interconnected in spirit, though not necessarily in flesh? No simple answer emerged at once. Instead, a calm expanded in my heart. I sensed that no choice was wrong. The divine tapestry was broad enough to accommodate each soul's route toward enlightenment. The question was which path best matched the inner calling I felt at this juncture. The unfolding decision. Gradually, I leaned toward remaining in spirit while stepping up to a higher service. My heart resonated with the idea of guiding not just one but many, offering creative and healing inspirations across the lines between realms. A soft chord within me thrilled at the thought of continuing in rescue work, forming new alliances with advanced spirits, and perhaps one day helping orchestrate large-scale transformations on Earth through spiritual influence. I also recognized that incarnating again, with all memory veiled, might be better postponed if I felt guided to deepen my spiritual mastery here first. Yet I could not ignore a tender part of me that longed for the physical closeness to my beloved, sharing joys and sorrows as living companions might. In mortal existence, love can be tested in ways unique to a dense material plane, and if I re-entered that sphere, we might fulfill karmic threads together, forging an even more profound unity. The possibility hovered, luminous yet daunting in my imagination. At length I sought out my beloved's soul presence through prayerful attunement. I felt her gentle aura respond. In an impression too subtle to be words, she conveyed acceptance of either path, loving me no less if I remained a guiding spirit, and likewise supporting me if Earth's lessons called me back. That unconditional encouragement eased the ache of indecision. Whichever choice I made, I knew we would remain bound by love beyond the illusions of distance or separation. Preparing for the path ahead. When I emerged from this deep communion, Brother of Hope appeared at my side, accompanied by 2 luminous helpers from one of the higher spheres. Sensing my inclination, he smiled. "You have chosen to extend your service in spirit, have you not?" His tone suggested he already knew my heart's answer. I confirmed it softly. A wave of peaceful conviction washed over me, as though an invisible burden had been lifted. The luminous helpers then conveyed that I would undergo a new phase of attunement, preparing me to operate in an expanded capacity, not solely in lower plane rescues or mediumistic contact, but in more dynamic forms of spiritual inspiration. I would be tasked with channeling higher thought patterns into the minds of receptive mortals, scientists on the cusp of life-changing discoveries, artists whose visions could uplift a generation, or leaders striving to bring about compassionate policies. To accomplish this, I needed to refine my own energies, so as to transmit such inspiration without distorting it through lingering personal biases. They also mentioned that I would at times be free to revisit the earth plane in a more subtle way, drawing close to my beloved or others with whom I shared karmic ties, offering them gentle direction if and when their hearts opened to it. The Brothers of Light would oversee these missions to ensure that free will remained paramount. A spark of joy fluttered within me at the idea that my cherished vow to protect and support her could still be honored, now in a broader context that served many. An interval of higher training. Immediately following this decision, I was escorted to a new region perched at the borders of a higher sphere. The landscape there was breathtakingly refined, the very air shimmering with color I had no name for. Buildings of crystalline structure radiated a soft, welcoming light. I was assigned a small dwelling, a tranquil retreat ringed by cascading vines that sang with a faint chiming melody when stirred by gentle astral breezes. Over the ensuing days, I attended specialized sessions with advanced teachers, studying how to focus thought essences that could spark insights in mortal minds. We practiced constructing inspiration packets, subtle clusters of ideas and images condensed into a single flash. When directed at a suitable earthbound recipient, someone open to new insights, these packets might manifest as a sudden epiphany, an innovative solution to a seemingly intractable problem, or a sense of courage in a moment of despair. I also learned how to guard against over-influence. A mortal might sense our inspiration but must remain free to interpret or apply it. If we projected too strongly, we risked overshadowing their will or burdening them with visions they were not yet ready to handle. Hence, the key was to align with the mortal's own highest aspirations, offering just enough light to guide their next step, never imposing a grand design they had not freely embraced. Such lessons resonated deeply with me, reminding me of my own rescue, how my guides had intervened only once I showed a flicker of willingness. They did not force me to accept the truth. Now I carried that principle into a more refined art, aiming to nurture potential in others without trespassing on their autonomy. A surprise encounter. During these training sessions, I had an unexpected reunion with a spirit who, in my earthly life, had been a dear friend I once hurt through negligence. In the mortal world, our bond had frayed, leaving her feeling betrayed. After my death, she passed on a decade or so later, initially harboring residual anger at me. But time in the transitional spheres had softened her perspective, and we now met in this higher region with open hearts. The moment we recognized one another, tears of reconciliation flowed, and we embraced in relief. She had since advanced on her own unique path, focusing on emotional healing for spirits weighed down by unprocessed traumas. We discovered that our respective works, her skill in emotional therapy and mine in creative or intellectual inspiration, could dovetail in assisting souls on both sides of the earthly veil. This meeting underscored once more how every unresolved tension can eventually be harmonized when hearts are willing. The universe had woven our threads back together so we could collaborate from a place of mutual growth, free from the misunderstandings of our mortal past. Visits to the lower planes and earth. Despite my shifting focus, I did not wholly abandon the lower spheres. Periodically, I volunteered for rescue excursions, wishing to keep my empathy for the lost souls keen and immediate. On these missions, I noticed how my new training enabled me to shine a steadier, more penetrating light, dispersing illusions with less strain. Having glimpsed more exalted vibrations, I sensed an added resilience in my aura. I also continued brief journeys to the earth plane, guided by advanced protectors, to provide calm encouragement where it was sought, whether in hospital wards, war-ravaged zones, or quiet studios where creative minds wrestled with doubt. On occasion, I invisibly joined my beloved in her charitable activities, contributing a flicker of reassurance whenever she faltered. Her spiritual sensitivity had grown so that she sometimes paused, looking around as though feeling a presence. Although she did not see me, she often smiled with gentle confidence, as if certain she was not alone. Each time my heart felt bathed in gratitude, a grand vision of interconnectedness. As my training neared completion, the elder brother visited me in the crystalline halls. After a warm greeting, he led me to a high vantage point, an observation platform that overlooked a swirling, multi-layered view of Earth and its adjoining astral spheres. With a slight shift in consciousness, I saw, or sensed, the planet encircled by shimmering bands of light and shadow. Countless spirits toiled in rescue missions, healing stations, creative workshops, and guidance roles, their combined energies forming a luminous lattice around the globe. There is no corner of creation untouched by love, the elder brother intoned. Yet many remain blind to it, enthralled by the illusions of fear or separation. The tasks you are embracing, whether through direct contact or subtle inspiration, are vital strands in this lattice of compassion. Each moment you direct light to another is a contribution to Earth's gradual awakening. A profound reverence dawned in me. I realized that every selfless thought, every patient effort to rescue or inspire, contributed to a cosmic tapestry brimming with promise. My own journey, once so narrowly focused on personal guilt and longing, had merged into this vast collective work, guided by the hands of the divine. The sense of purpose that filled me was beyond words, the culmination of my journey thus far. Satisfied that I was prepared, my mentors bestowed upon me a final blessing, a gentle ceremony in which they affirmed my commitment to spiritual inspiration and entrusted me with a refined level of light. It was not a worldly ordination, but a solemn vow in which I promised to wield the creative and healing powers of the Spirit with unwavering integrity and respect for every soul's free will. In return, they assured me I would never be left unsupported. Higher currents of grace and guidance would always flow if I remained aligned with love. By now, I understood that my personal story of dying unprepared, wandering in despair, finding rescue and redemption, had evolved into a chapter of a much larger story, the ongoing redemption of Earth's children and the forging of unity between incarnate and discarnate realms. My beloved, too, was an integral part of this tapestry. Whether or not we would one day share a physical incarnation again, our bond served as a beacon, reminding me that personal affection, purified through empathy and service, naturally expands into universal compassion. A glimpse of reunion. Before the conclusion of my transitional period, I experienced one last precious vision. In a meditative state, I saw my beloved asleep on earth, stirring in a gentle dream. By divine grace, for a few moments, I was allowed to appear to her in that dream, my face softly illuminated. She recognized me, tears of joy slipping down her cheeks. We spoke no words, but our hearts communed in a silent promise. We would continue growing in love, each in our current realm, united by an unbreakable thread of devotion. When she awoke, she would likely recall this as a sweet, half-remembered dream, but its essence would imprint upon her spirit. The grace of that dream lingered in me long after I withdrew. It felt like the gentle closing of a circle, acknowledging the love that had sparked my entire transformation and affirming that neither time nor space could sever it, the ongoing horizon. Thus did my sojourn in these mid to higher astral zones reach a new plateau. No abrupt ending or grand farewell marked the occasion. Rather, it was a natural transition into a new calling that encompassed all I had learned. I was no longer merely Franchezzo, the remorseful wanderer, or even Franchezzo, the diligent rescuer. I had grown into a spirit worker devoted to fostering spiritual inspiration, bridging earth and the spirit lands through subtle channels of creativity, thought, and compassion. In quiet moments, I reminisced about the earliest days after my death, watching my own lifeless body, adrift in confusion, powerless to comfort my grieving beloved. How far I had come since then. The regrets and missteps of that mortal life had become stepping stones to humility and empathy. Now, as I prepared to embark on broader initiatives, I felt neither shame nor vain pride in recounting my story. Rather, I perceived it as a testimony to the unfailing mercy that rescues every sincere soul, no matter how lost. The spirit lands, I now knew, are not a static end to life's journey, but a vast continuum of discovery. Spheres upon spheres beckoned, each more radiant than the last. No soul walks alone, for mentors abound, each offering a guiding hand, just as I might do for those behind me. Likewise, behind the highest mentor stands a greater light still, onward and onward to the infinite source. Final reflections and farewell. As I conclude this account, an abridged record of my post-mortem wanderings and awakening, may it serve to ease the fears of those who tremble before the threshold of death. May it reassure the grieving that their loved ones live on, and that true remorse always finds pardon if the soul reaches out for it. The spirit world is multifaceted, from grey lands of self-imposed darkness to realms of transcendent beauty, all connected by the luminous current of divine love. My journey, though ongoing, has reached a pivotal clarity I once thought impossible. Pride, anger, and vain longing have been largely transmuted into humility, empathy, and reverent wonder. From clinging to my beloved in selfish regret, I have grown to embrace a universal compassion that embraces her and all souls together in one circle of light. In the name of that all-enfolding love, I urge every reader, whether mortal or discarnate, to open their hearts. Let the illusions of hatred or hopelessness dissolve. Let the joys of simple service, honest repentance, and creative kindness guide your feet toward higher paths. If my story can kindle even one spark of hope, then I offer it with all sincerity, knowing that the living flame of love will complete the work that words alone cannot. And so I take leave of these pages, returning to my quiet, purposeful labors in the spirit lands. Yet the bond forged by this sharing remains. In your hours of doubt, remember that a once flawed spirit called Franchezzo found a path out of darkness, and so can you. As I continue to serve in these vistas of unseen splendor, I extend my blessing across the veil, sure that someday we shall meet in the fullness of divine truth. Until then, believe in love's power to heal, and walk forward in peace. We hope this abridgment provides a cohesive and meaningful reflection of the original text's central themes, the transformative power of regret and repentance, by which Franchezzo is guided out of darkness, the role of loving guides, the brothers of light, the elder brother, and other advanced spirits who assist souls willing to learn, the interplay of free will and divine grace, illustrating that no one is forever lost if they truly seek redemption. The potent bond of love, particularly between Franchezzo and his beloved, which transcends the barriers of death. Service to others in the spirit lands, reflecting how compassion and selflessness hasten spiritual progress. Thank you for reading this abridged version. May it provide insight, comfort, and inspiration to those who seek to understand life's continuity beyond the physical plane.